Springfield. For 125 years, we have been partners, establishing a strong community that grows businesses, educates leaders, and nourishes families. For 5 generations, we have provided exceptional health care for Springfield and all those who call it home. Mercy, one of the nation's top 5 large healthcare systems. To find out how Mercy helped grow Springfield, visit mercy.net/Queen City.
Hello and welcome back to Ladies Who Launch, sponsored by Volt Credit Union. If you're just now tuning in to us, we've just heard from best-selling author Nancy Allen. Our next segment is sponsored by Mercy. Entering her 55th year as a Sister of Mercy, she's had the privilege of spending over 15 years at Mercy Springfield Communities in many capacities, working with a variety of coworkers, and she delights in legacy and leadership development. I've had the opportunity of meeting our next presenter, and she is an absolute, genuine delight. Please give a warm virtual welcome to Sister Richard Mary Burke.
Good afternoon to everyone. I am deeply humbled to be invited to represent our beloved Mercy Ministry among you today. And we're very thrilled to be a part of the evolving program, Ladies Who Launch. Today, for our reflection, which I will be offering to you, I would like to just put us in a different context. No matter what faith tradition we are, all of us are believers in the person of Jesus. One of Jesus's most faithful disciples was a woman by the name of Catherine McCauley, and she was the woman who originally founded our religious community, whose name is also a part of the ministry. We are the Religious Sisters of Mercy. And as a beloved disciple of Jesus, as he taught, so did Catherine. And she taught us always in our community and ministries to always be sure to read the signs of your times. I gave some thought to that as I was coming to visit with you today. Because you see, you, me, all of us, we are blessed women of our local communities, our families, and our nation. As women, we have been given us many, many special gifts, but the one I'd like to focus on today is that we are given the capacity and the gift to nurture. Whenever we intend on nurturing another or nurturing a culture or a situation, it's important that we already know there's a certain purpose. What is our purpose in mind? I'd like to offer you a very simple tool that might be a means of support, encouragement, and affirmation for you as ladies who launch, that you can bring about new hope and spirit in your homes, your communities, and your businesses. That tool is the gift of faith. In faith, we have certain symbols. And one of those basic symbols, which we all share, is the symbol of a crucifix, no matter which faith tradition we are. There's a bodily figure which represents the person of Jesus, who had the capacity to model for us unconditional love and service. As a follower, our foundress, Catherine McCauley, wanted to have something similar for our earliest sisters. And so she constructed this cross. And this cross is a cross within a cross. You will see this symbol many, many times. And she did not choose to use a bodily figure. The reason is because as we transitioned in the ministry, and we now have the Mercy Cross throughout all of our facilities and buildings, we don't have a bodily figure because, my friends, we are called to each be and represent the person of Jesus, to bring his heart, his mind, his loving hands, and his arms to embrace all those that we meet and to thereby give witness to our faith. Gracious and loving God, we ask you to bless each one of these sacred women gathered together here. And please give us the gift and the capacity to love with your love and to embrace with your light, with your arms and your spirit, all those with whom we encounter each day. May we all be ladies who launch, and who launch from the depths of our heart, our love and concern for our families, our many friends, and all those in our beloved communities. We ask this in the name of Jesus. Amen. And we'll pause now for a moment of quiet. As we close this portion, the next item on our agenda is a panel discussion about leading through a crisis, which are the current signs of our times. Our moderator for today is my dear friend Sonia Coleman, who has seen plenty of both during her career in television news and now as Mercy's Media Relations and Communications Manager. Please help me welcome Sonia for our afternoon panel discussion. Thank you.
And thank you, Sister Richard Mary, for that wonderful introduction. She is such a blessing. Well, today I have the pleasure of introducing you to three incredible female leaders: Katie Towns, Crystal Simon and Dr. Carol Taylor. Now, in case you're wondering out there on the virtual feed, we are abiding by the new ordinance. We are all wearing masks today, but we do have exceptions for eating and drinking. And then, of course, while speaking to an audience, when you are 6 feet apart. And trust me, they have measured this out. We are at least 6 feet apart. So first, let's start with Katie Towns, Assistant Director at the Springfield-Greene County Health Department. She will definitely keep us honest on that 6 feet distance there. After completing a Bachelor of Science in Sports Medicine, Athletic Training, and later a Master's of Public Health from Missouri State University, Katie has spent her career in healthcare-related fields in nonprofit, healthcare, and government. In her current role, she's worked toward enhancing systems and policies that improve community health, most recently related to improving mental health and reducing substance abuse. Katie is led by a vision to work across sectors to incorporate health as an element of developing Springfield's infrastructure and our culture. Katie's the mother of 2 beautiful children, Cole and Marin. Katie, thank you for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
All right. Next, let me introduce Crystal Simon. Crystal is the Chief Operations Officer at Barnabas Foundation, including Camp Barnabas and Barnabas Prep. Camp Barnabas is a unique ministry providing Christian experiences to more than 4,000 individuals with special needs and chronic illnesses, and their missionary volunteers every summer. Under Crystal's leadership in the last 4 years, Camp Barnabas has grown donations by 76%. Crystal is a mother to 3 amazing kids, Olivia, Sophia, and Will. Crystal, thank you for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And last but certainly not least, I'd like to introduce you all to Dr. Carol Taylor. Dr. Taylor is wrapping up her 45th year of service in the world of education, 25 years in public education, and the last 20 in Christian higher education. Now, her plan was to retire as president of Evangel University this summer, but those plans got disrupted by the arrival of COVID-19, and really what didn't get disrupted. Dr. Taylor's known for taking on challenging assignments like developing a public school system K-12 program for immigrant students, leading the launch of a new international testing program, and the research and design for a major test redesign, leading academic programs, and stepping into turnaround situations. So Dr. Carol Taylor, thank you so much for being with us today. Appreciate all of you ladies. So let's go ahead, jump right in. Let's talk about the COVID-19 crisis and all the unique challenges it's brought to all of your businesses, organizations. And Katie, we're going to start with you. You have been front and center with the health department during all of this. So talk about some of those unique challenges.
So I think I'll start with what is not unique about this. This situation has evolved extremely rapidly, and I think if we were to fast forward and talk about this in a year from now, I would be very interested to sort of reflect and have many different answers, I'm sure. But I think one of the, besides the fact that we now have to learn how to wear makeup with a mask on, that is really becoming an issue for me. One of the things that has been so hard about this specific response is the unknown. We at our department have a lot of very talented people, and we have a lot of tools that we use on a regular basis to respond to disease all the time. And we do that sort of silently. You might not hear about a lot of the work that we do, and we kind of feel like that's a win. And so when this sort of became a rising issue, we very quickly became thrust to front and center and using the tools that we have always used. But we were sort of faced with not really knowing how this virus works and what was going to happen. A virus, in my mind, is sort of like raising a child. I mean, you can train it and you can sort of expect certain things, but then it does rogue things all of a sudden, and you just don't know where and when those things are going to occur. And so we're operating on a lot of good, sound evidence from past responses, historical things, but the challenge of the unknown is probably one of the biggest things, and I know everybody's experiencing that. So we are not immune. I feel like, have a lot of expertise, but we are still in the dark on a lot of things.
doing the best you can in the situation.
Yes, always
obviously.
trying. Yes.
All right. Crystal, we're going to turn to you. What has it meant for your organization?
It's been absolutely incredible. So for those of you that aren't familiar with Camp Barnabas, we are a summer camp that primarily serves individuals with chronic illness and special needs. And so we run a really fast ship, so to speak. We operate 10 weeks out of the year. We start at the end of May, and we run to the beginning of August. During those 10 weeks, we will serve over 4,000 campers. We'll serve missionary volunteers, which are your high schoolers and middle schoolers, as well as around 175 summer staff. So you have a lot of people on property and a really quick turnaround. And so for us, when COVID hit, we had to make the incredibly difficult decision. And I'm going to try to say it without crying because it seems so raw. We ended up canceling camp for our campers. And so what does that mean for them? For our campers, a lot of them don't understand what it means to social distance. We also provide a lot of the care for them. So a lot of their hygiene needs we fulfill, whether that be bathing, taking care of them, going to the restroom, and then feeding them as well. So social distance really wasn't an option. In addition to social distancing, we have masks. We have a lot of children that have autism. Wearing a mask isn't going to work either. And so we knew going into this that the challenge was great, but fundamentally we believe our greatest responsibility is to keep everyone safe at camp. And so we chose not to operate for that reason. In addition to our camper population, we've been blessed to have around 175 medical volunteers, a lot of those coming from Mercy and Cox, that will volunteer a week to make camp possible. There are weeks that we have, the majority of our kids are in a wheelchair. They have a feeding tube, they have a trach, they have a catheter. And so our program does not exist without the medical community. And so we felt like it was not socially responsible for us to pull a frontline worker from the front line and say, hey, let's come and serve at Barnabas. As much as I can tell you with conviction that that was the right decision for our organization, it doesn't make it any less difficult. We had to send out a message to our campers, and for those of you that have children, they have the joy of doing many incredible things throughout the summer. For our campers, camp is the thing. It's the thing. And I knew that by communicating that message, I was taking away that one thing for them, and they're going to have to wait possibly a year, maybe even longer, for that to happen. For those of you that are parents, you can relate. We're dealing with a lot. Stress is high. And our camper families, this is the only time that they get a break. They don't get to take a vacation. They don't do date night. They don't get a respite. And I'm telling parents, you know what? It's going to be another year before you get that break. Amongst all of that, we also made the decision to change our financial model pretty significantly. So this crisis, to say the least, has been a challenge. But I can sit confidently before you and our board and say that we all believe that we made the right decision for us.
It was tough, but something that had to be done. Dr. Taylor?
Yeah. It's a
You can
hard,
relate.
I can relate. It's a hard season. So none of us knew back in February, March, how this was all going to play out, right? I was actually in California at a donor event, and when our team flew west, you know, we were mindful. By the time we arrived at the event site, you know, there were cautions and things that were beginning to unfold. Less than a week later, we flew back. We flew through Denver, and suddenly the airport's half empty. That was Monday. On Wednesday, we're having emergency meetings. It was the week before we started spring break. By Thursday, we had the cabinet we turned our cabinet meeting space into what we affectionately referred to as the war room. By Friday, we had notified all the students, when you go home for spring break, take your laptops, take your books, and we're going to give you an extra week for spring break this year. You're going to love it. But you need to be prepared. You might not come back to campus. Well, the reason we did that was because by that Friday, we already knew the likelihood that we would be saying we're going to go remote was very, very high. And we needed that week to figure out how we would deliver everything we do remotely. So that meant in a 2-week period, faculty got over 800 courses ready for delivery online or remotely using Zoom. We have made a huge investment in Zoom and Zoom meetings, but that also meant classes that typically you don't do remotely. You know, how do you do your senior recital via Zoom? How do you do labs and other things? But in 2 weeks, our faculty kind of rose to the challenge. And then you just began taking each thing one at a time. Okay, next, can they come back? Doesn't look like it. We're going to need a plan for students to vacate their dorms. At this point, we're sheltering in place. So we're going to have a sign up. We're going to say there's no rush. You can take a whole month for us to do this. And then the question now is how do we plan to reopen campus in the fall? And this is really complex. At first, so I meet every month with a group we call a University Planning Council. It's university leaders, faculty, staff from all areas across the campus. As we got started in this work to develop a safety plan, we realized this is a lot bigger than our University Planning Council. So we converted that group into a COVID-19 safety task force. We expanded it. We've actually had 75 people on different teams. And it's everything from not just your academic programs. How do you do residential life? How do you do athletics? How do your business offices operate? What happens in the cafeteria? What happens to all those other outside the classroom activities that you have? How are you going to do recruiting of new students? What about all those students that were planning to come with their parents and visit campus in the spring and make their final decision to come? I mean, every area that you can think of in terms of how a university functions and operates was part of this consideration and group. We're now releasing some of those plans. The final plan is over like 60 pages long. But we almost start every meeting with what has become our motto, blessed are the flexible, because almost on a daily basis, this evolves and changes. I've reminded our team of it was a quote from President Eisenhower that said as he was planning for battle during World War II, he said, really, plans are pretty useless, but planning is indispensable. So the notion that the plan we spent so much time developing last week just went out the window because things have changed, and now we're going to have plan C, D, E, F. I forget what number we're on. So there's a story that I've shared as often as well in our community. And it was by Stephen Covey. He's repeated the story numerous times. It comes from his book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I still have the original. I'm so old. I actually have the original book that was published like in '89. But I've never forgotten this story because it's so applicable to when you're in times of crisis and you don't know if everything you did last week is still going to be the plan today. But it was the story of there were 2 battleships that were out at sea practicing maneuvers, and it was this really foggy night. And off in the distance was a light, and the ship is so the captain says, tell them change course 20 degrees starboard, because we're on a collision course to crash. And so the response, the signal comes back, no, you change course 20 degrees. And the captain's going like, who does he think he is? So he says, I'm a captain, change course 20 degrees. The response comes back, I'm a seaman first class. I advise you to change course 20 degrees. A seaman telling a captain what to do? Tell him I'm a battleship. Change course 20 degrees. The response comes back, I'm a lighthouse. Right? So guess who changed course, right? So we'd set our course. We're going there. You know, we've got the right of way to be here. But there are times when you have new information, you say, good idea to change course 20 degrees. And so we're kind of living in that reality every day. We make our plans. And as we get new information, we'll change course, and blessed are the flexible. Right?
I think we're all learning that, we all know what we can't do right now, right? It's, okay, well, then what can we do? And that's really where the new ideas come in. I think it's pretty safe to say that COVID has been probably one of the biggest crises you guys have had to face in your careers, especially moving very quickly. So I know you each have guiding principles that have kind of helped you through that. So for us at Mercy, we always turn to our mission statement, and that is, as the Sisters of Mercy before us, we bring to life the healing ministry of Jesus through our compassionate care and exceptional service. So it's always about how can I help someone else? And we know that if we're helping other people, we're doing the right thing, we're on the right course. So I would like to know, what is your guiding principle, or maybe a truth that you have focused on, a true north during this pandemic? And Dr. Taylor, we're going to go the other way. We're going to start with you. Tell us what has been a guiding principle for you. I think part of it is being flexible, right?
Yeah. You can't get so rigid. You'll just break and bend. So over the years, I've actually had several principles that I think apply whether you're in a crisis or just in more normal times. So for me, the first one is you've got to be all in. You've got to commit to the journey. So whenever I'm working to build a team, one of the questions I ask is, what's the biggest challenge you've ever faced? Because I want to know, if you're going to join this team, if the road gets rough, if you end up in a pandemic, that you're not going to run for the exit, right? You're going to be all in. So there's something about committing and realizing you really can't lead in a crisis if you've got one foot out the door. So you've got to be all in. The other is, I'm like, give me the facts. What are we facing? So this notion of you've got to confront reality, but sometimes reality is ugly and brutal, and you've got to find a way to confront reality with a hope, that there's hope on the other side of this. We're going to get through it. We may not know today how we're going to do it, but there has to be a hope that will kind of rally people to move forward. The other is, I have this, it actually came from when I was at Vanguard University, and in my inauguration, the person doing the, blah, 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 here it is, you're the president. I mean, it wasn't blah, 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 but it was very special. But he actually told a story about leading with a third-class ticket and stagecoach travel. And a few years later, one of our board members actually on eBay went out and found an authentic third-class stagecoach ticket. But the idea is we don't travel first class. If you're going to lead through a crisis, you've got to be in the mix, sleeves rolled up. If you're asking people to sacrifice, you sacrifice first. And this notion of leading by example. And actually, it's a great way to lead. And it's much more exciting that way. And then you have to expect things are going to get messy. It's not. We often think of progressing from, in a plan that we go from A to B to C to D. In fact, it's more like A, B, back up, go forward. So just expect it's going to get messy, and you've got to keep going. And then I have if you read Simon Sinek's book about why, but to keep the right things in order. First it's why, then it's who, then it's how. So you're driven by your mission. So you don't run for the exit because you believe in what your organization does. So the reason it causes so much pain to think you can't have your camps, because you're passionate about the vision and the mission of why your organization exists. Why don't you run away from public health right now? Because the reason you exist is to keep the community safe. So you've got to believe in the mission of what you're doing, because when things get hard, that's what will keep you focused and moving forward. And then who you surround yourself with, it doesn't matter where you're trying to get to or how great the plan is. If you don't have the right people working with you that are all in and are committed, no plan's going to work. And then you can figure out, what are we going to do to get there? You've got to find your inspiration, resilience, so that you've got the grit to keep going. We've already talked about blessed are the flexible, and you've got to love what you do. We lead because we love our teams. Got to find a way to keep perspective, and you have to make space to grieve the losses that will occur along the way, because they're real and they're painful. So those are some of my principles.
Those are beautiful. Thank you so much. All right, Katie, you're up next.
Oh, okay.
Guiding principle, true north. What's kind of kept you going?
So I have a couple of organizational ones and then a personal one, but I have been tremendously lucky to have two predecessors that I consider great leaders to me, and Kevin Gibson and Clay Goddard, who have both been the directors of the health department, have poured into me a lot over the past several years. And I know we've all gotten to see the example that Clay gives us, and I've been lucky to have known that example for a long time, but I'm sort of proud that our community now gets to see what I get to be privileged enough to work with on a daily basis. But Kevin and Clay really helped impart a lot of good wisdom over the course of several years. But one of the first things that I learned from them quite some time ago was that you want to always seek to hire people that are smarter than yourself. And so we have an amazing team at our department, and talk about emotional. I can't tell you how proud I am of our department. We have 110 people who are all in. And the response that they have given and that they have poured into our community is completely immeasurable in my mind. It's not easy, the jobs that they're doing. You know, we make a lot of people very frustrated right now, and so they get the brunt of a lot of that. And I am just privileged to be able to work with a lot of people who are very smart, and that came from good wisdom from my leaders. The other thing is that you don't make friends when you need them. And so our department has really worked over the past decade or so to build a lot of relationships throughout the community. And I can tell you, we all love our community dearly, and to have those relationships and the fortunate timing of our ability to connect with those relationships has given us the ability to respond to our community with a collective support that is also immeasurable. And I know that we are in a sort of second wave of things that are amping up right now, but our initial outtake has been tremendous because of the support across sectors that we have received. And then finally, you know, all of that sort of has given perspective on how important my job and my commitment to that is right now. And that's something that has been forced in a lot of ways to really prioritize and figure out what it is that we're going to focus on. And for me, that has been work and then my kids. And so this has really pressed into focus what are the most important things. And those are two very hard things right now, though, because there's a lot of unknown with my kids that they're asking questions about. And so I struggle with anxiety. I have for years, and I have a tremendous counselor who has taught me about self-care. And I know that's a buzzword, but it is something that if you don't have that understanding of what that really means, I would encourage everybody to really seek that out and find out what that means for you. Because if I had not learned, and I'm not great at it, but if I had not learned some of those principles in the past several years that I've been seeing her name is Deborah Cox, and she is amazing. But those things have carried me through this, and I have been able to let things go and just learn to allow myself grace and rest. And that has been a truly a gift during this time. So those are my few things.
I would just add to that. I mean, I journal every morning, and one of the standard questions that I ask myself is, what am I going to do to take care of me today? You know, and I kind of try to think of that as like, what's the fun thing for me today? And it could be as simple as like, I'm going to paint my nails tonight or whatever. But to know ahead of time, I'm going to carve out a little time for me, and I do think that's very important.
So important.
It's so important. Mm-hmm. All right, Crystal, what about you?
Well,
True
you guys,
North.
Yeah, you guys have said several that were already on my list, so I'm going to only share a few of them. I, too, am so fortunate that I get to serve and alongside our phenomenal CEO, John Talak. If you haven't had the chance to meet him, he's an incredible human being, and so having him in the thick of this has been incredible. Our team at Barnabas, exactly like you said, Carol, they are all in. They love this ministry, and they are there for all the right reasons. So a couple of the four that I've tried to focus on over the last several weeks is, number one, I am a total type A. I love a spreadsheet. I love a planner. And I have learned that I am not in control. And there are so many things. As much as I have plan A, B, C, D, okay, let's move that here. It's not in my control. And so that's super, super hard. So what can I control? And so my huge that goes back to is I can control my attitude. How do I show up every day? Do I have a grateful heart? So what does that look like? And then my response to a situation. I can control those two things. My number 2, which I love to please people, I want people to love the ministry of Barnabas. I want them to like me. Well, the reality is, when you're in leadership and you're making the decisions that we're making right now, not everyone is going to love you. And that's a hard pill to swallow at times. Number 3, over-communicate, communicate, be transparent, and communicate again. And so I think that that's huge. As much as we kind of are struggling ourselves, I think it's okay to go to our staff and team and say, okay, this is what we're thinking, shoot holes in it. What did we miss? Or what does it look like to our donors? And being super transparent. I just canceled camp, and I've got a $750,000 shortfall. Like, pray with me, be with me. What does this look like? So you cannot over-communicate enough. And for us, I know it's, I used to work for Jack Stack. I had the honor and privilege for years, and he had a motto, cash is king. And so I can sit here confidently today and tell you I was able to make some really hard decisions because I had cash. So it wasn't about, oh my gosh, are we going to survive from a cash standpoint? I can do what's right for our campers and those we serve.
So the next question is really a lot about self-care. So, you know, it has felt like for a lot of people, the weight of the world just feels like it's on your shoulders. You don't have your normal team around you to support you all the time because people are working from home. They're a little bit socially isolated. So about self-care, what are those things that you do to keep yourself motivated so you can continue to motivate your team, your family? Let's go there. And Crystal, I'll just start with you.
Absolutely. So for me, I recognized this early on. I was going to have the COVID-19 real quick, and I was going to be living in my jammies for several weeks. And I recognized, you know what, this is not going to end how I want it to end. So you're exactly right. So for me, it's discipline and morning routine. As much as everyone's like, oh, you're a morning person. That's great. Well, really, I'm not a morning person. I just choose to wake up early because I know that that starts my day off on the right foot. So for me, that means getting up around 5 a.m. I spend quiet time. I read scripture. I pray. You mentioned earlier a gratitude journal is huge. One of my besties got me the 5-minute journal, and it's been a part of my practice for the last 2 years now. I think during a pandemic, it's easy to get caught in the negative and the cycle of what's happening. And so for me, it's finding opportunities to be grateful because there are still amazing things that are happening, and I can choose to have gratitude. And you both mentioned self-care. Exercise is huge. If I get up early, I have quiet time, I pray, I journal, and I work out. That right there are the pillars that just kind of make everything else happen for the rest of the day. I can be a little bit more patient. I can show up as my best self. I can be there for my husband and my kids when I get off work. And I found when I am not disciplined and I'm not in a routine, I can't do those things. And so for me, during a crisis, that has been like my non-negotiable. That has to happen.
That's great. All right. Katie?
So a few of the same things, but I do think that when this all began, everybody was sort of talking about how they were staying at home, and my life was just the opposite. And so I couldn't quite understand what this boredom was that people were experiencing. And so it was a hard transition, and I quickly alienated all of my, and some of them were alienated on my behalf, my coping mechanisms, but I didn't work out, and I was not seeing friends and not, able to see my family, and a lot of different things that are sort of the things that you gravitate towards when you're super stressed. And so this virus has taken away those coping mechanisms in a lot of ways. And so I started running years ago, and I know that runners can sometimes be annoying in the stories that they tell, but I do feel like that, for me, has been one of those things that has helped me the most in coping with my anxiety. And so when I realized that I was eating gummy bears every day at work instead of getting in a run, a friend of mine had sent me Runner's World, and one day I picked it up, and there was this thing about an article about doing a running streak. And so I decided one day I was going to start it. And it talked about how even if you just got 1 mile in per day, that was enough, and you could count that as a day. And the challenge was to do it for 41 days. And so I started that like right after Memorial Day, and I just finished it. And I can tell you, it just gave me back that thing that I needed to sort of stay committed to myself and taking care of myself. And even one of the days that I remember, so I got a new phone recently, and one day I went to pick up food to take to my kids, and I lost it, and then it was stolen. And so that day I was trying to figure out how to get a new, I mean, it's like panic, right, when you lose your phone. So I'm at the end of the day trying to figure out how to do that and take care of my kids. And we were at my office trying to use my phone from my desk at like 8:30 p.m. And I got home and I hadn't done my run, and I was so mad that I had to do that, but I did it, and it was like almost like that gift of at least I accomplished one thing that I needed to do for me today. So I would say that you have to stay committed, and I think I've learned that through this process. So it's been a gift in disguise.
Yeah, I would say it's not running for me unless someone's chasing me. I always say that. I've been trying to swim every day, which is why my hair is a little green. But, you know, these are the things you do during a pandemic. You got to take some time for yourself. All right, Dr. Taylor, what about you? Your guiding principle, true north, sort of a self-care
Where's
thing.
north?
Where is north? It's
Which way's
moving, I
north?
think.
No.
Yeah.
So I think one of the hardest things when you're in a leadership role and you have all this responsibility, and especially if that role includes caring for others. So there's a reason when you get on a plane, and you know the instructions that we tend to ignore because we've heard it before and we block it out, but there's a reason that one of those instructions is when they're going through, if there should happen to be a loss of oxygen and the oxygen masks fall down, it's really important that you put your mask on first before you turn to help, you know, your child or traveling companion. And it's not a selfish thing. It's actually because if you don't have a good supply of oxygen, you can't help the one next to you. I sometimes have to remind myself of that because I'm really good telling the team, you got to take a break. You know, in fact, because we've been running full throttle since March, like you. And so about a month ago, I said, look, guys, we're not going to have anything but fumes come August if we don't like step away. So I'm asking everyone next week, you've got to block at least a week and get away. And I want it on the calendar. And so until I have an extraordinary admin, I couldn't survive without her. And so then after everyone had she says, and what week am I blocking for you, Carol? Oh, yeah. So it's not a selfish thing. It's actually a loving thing if we take care of ourselves. So other small practical things, like, because especially if you're working like 24/7 and you've got 7 things you've just checked off, and it's a really bad habit. You're shooting emails out at 11:30 at night, and then 6 o'clock Saturday morning, there's another one. There's this wonderful little thing on your calendar that you can have it sent later. So we just set a rule, unless it's emergency, unless someone's dying, a building's on fire, if it can wait until Monday morning, if you need to get it off your to-do list, because that's one of the ways you're going to be able to relax, put the delivery at Monday morning at 7:30. And that works, right? Breathe, take a break. The other is find whatever is life-giving to you, whether it's running, swimming, journaling, developing what is really a spiritual discipline of gratitude at the end. So for me, it's helpful at the end of a really, really rough day to just write, what are the things I'm grateful for today, right? So I have toilet paper at my house. I don't hoard it, but I was never at risk. And I thought, there are people around. I have food in my refrigerator. I have a beautiful home to go home to. I have at one point it was have heating. Now I have air conditioning. I have flowers on my deck. And so find those things that you're grateful for, and then find those things that inspire you. For me, it's often finding that in the stories of other people, sometimes people who aren't well known, who've done extraordinary things, and saying, how did they do that? How did they get through that? And letting their inspiration be yours. And so whether it's in reading biographies or if you don't have the energy to read a book, you can find wonderful stories about real life stories that are on Netflix or Amazon Prime. But take some time to look at the stories of others who've done extraordinary things and say, there are people who've gotten through impossible situations. For me, one of them was Memorial Day. So at the end of life, my parents shared a home with me. My dad was a World War II veteran, one of 3 sons. All 3 went to war, World War II. And I remember the year my grandfather died, I went and spent the summer with my grandmother so she wouldn't be alone. And as a young adult, it occurred to me, as a child, I didn't think about it, but as a young adult, there was a time when all 3 of your sons were in harm's way. You had 2 in Europe, you had 1 in the Pacific, 1 survived the Battle of the Bulge, 1 did not make it home. And when I was moving from California here, my father had passed away and I was going to give away his hard side briefcase because we don't use those anymore. I picked it up in the closet, and it was heavy. And I opened it up, and inside this briefcase was just this treasure. It was the uncle I had never met because he was shot down in the war. He flew missions over Italy. But inside this briefcase was his Purple Heart, a couple other medals, and letters that he and my father wrote during World War II. So for me, one of those, let's step out and be reminded of a different time when people did really courageous things and got through it. And I spent the day reading letters that I had never read before of 2 brothers, during the war. So whatever it is, find it, make time, and go there and spend time in that place to get renewed.
I love that you told that story yesterday. You have those moments where you think, I don't have time to read this article someone forwarded me, but then you click in anyway. So I had one of those moments, and it was actually one of our nurses in Northwest Arkansas was featured yesterday in USA Today. She's EVS, Environmental Services, and she cleans the rooms of the COVID patients down there. She's their only contact, most of them, that they really get all day, who has enough time to really have a conversation, so she makes sure to have that conversation. Now, I thought I didn't have the time to read that, but once you do and you think about that's a really extraordinary thing, it just refreshes you. I was rejuvenated the rest of the afternoon. I'm glad I took the 3 minutes to read that. So you're right, just stepping back and saying, I'm lucky I have this.
And when you're in the middle of it, it's hard to think. A day will come, right, when we'll look back on this moment. Remember how we got through that? And those are the most inspiring stories, right? It's those cliffhanger moments, like, are you going to survive? Are you not going to survive? And that inspire all of us. And so hang on to the thought that one day, hopefully your children will be inspired by your stories of this time, because there'll be more hard times ahead, because that's life. Right?
That is life.
Yeah.
I think we'll probably end with you, Dr. Taylor, talking to us about what you mean when you say choose love. What do you mean by that?
So actually, I didn't originate that either.
Okay.
So being an academic, we read a lot of books. And so this was, and so I have a collection of books that are also inspiring. But there's a great book by Kouzes and Posner called The Truth About Leadership. And they talk about the 10 truths of leadership. Their very last truth is that leadership is an affair of the heart. And when I read it, it so resonated, right? So what keeps us going? The fact that we genuinely love what we do, the people we serve. And just a couple of comments. I mean, so there some of the comments from that chapter. They wrote that love is actually the soul of leadership. Love is what sustains people along an arduous journey in a difficult time. It's the source of a leader's courage, and a reminder that the purpose of leadership is legacy, not to be a legend. And we do more for those we care about and love. So why does it hurt? Because you're not having your kid, because you love these kids, you love these families. It makes a difference in the way you lead. And it's what inspires you every day to get up and keep going. Why do you get up every day, even when you're feeling stressed? Because you love this community. you care about the men and women and children that are part of Springfield and Greene County and Southwest Missouri. You know, how do you go to Mercy every day? And swimming helps, and your hair doesn't look that green.
Oh, good.
But it's because what drives you at the deepest core is this passion and love for those you serve, and that will keep you going when everything else fails.
Ooh, I want you to say that again.
That will keep you going when your hair's not that green.
No, not that hard. No, but I think that's really wise. Like,
Yeah.
you know, when you're loving people and you're serving people, that will keep you going.
That's right.
When things really do get tough. Ladies, thank you all so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. You have definitely led with grace during this time, and you've given yourself a little grace too, which is what you said, and I know your teams feel that too. So thank you all very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much to our panelists, and I think Dr. Taylor helped summarize it all very well. And what I believe we can feel from their words and their spirit is that being genuine to the work you're doing takes great heart, and each one of you are serving the people that you love and serving our community, and we are forever grateful. It is time for us to take yet a quick break. So you will see on the screen some visuals behind you. Don't forget to use the hashtag 417 Ladies Who Launch. We want to see you in your Volt socks. We want to see you tagging various comments, and I've already just posted on the Biz 417 YouTube. I'm seeing the comments there live as well. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back.
The main problems that Habitat for Humanity is trying to address is affordable housing. There's a big issue with individuals and families being able to afford a home for their family so that they can be safe.
The Child Advocacy Center provides services to children who are involved in an investigation of abuse. That could be physical abuse, sexual abuse, could be neglect, victim of exploitation, or maybe even witness to a crime.
Borrow My Angel is a relatively new nonprofit. After losing 2 siblings to suicide, we launched Borrow My Angel to provide additional resources to those that are struggling with depression and mental illness. As we continue to grow our organization, we realize that this unfortunate pandemic of mental illness and suicidal crisis is just a problem that continues to grow.
Overarching goal for the Child Advocacy Center would be to end the abuse for any children. But when they walk through our doors, our hope is that we can get them out of the situation that they're currently in.
When a family is having to make a decision on that teeter-totter balance between an affordable house and those other things that a family needs to survive, that's something that Habitat's trying to address. But the second thing that we're addressing is the fact that we know that there are a lot of single moms in our community who are trying to make those better decisions for their families. So Habitat welcomes all sorts of people into our home buying program, but we do know that we have a higher percentage of single moms going through our programming. Habitat for Humanity is proud to partner with Volt Credit Union to help empower women, to build strong women, to build confident women, all for Habitat's Women Build program.
Working with Volt Credit Union as a community partner has just been an amazing opportunity. They always just jump in with what is needed.
Volt Credit Union is a not-for-profit organization, and we not only want to help our members, but we also want to extend that mission out and help our community.
Having the courage to step up to the plate, both from our standpoint and from Volt's standpoint, to join forces with us to fight this very, very needed battle to affect this crisis that is happening from the mental health standpoint. In addition, the courage aspect of those fighting and battling depression and suicidal crisis, and the courage that it takes to fight that battle every single day.
It's just fantastic to work with somebody who just gives you that much support all the time.
Hello and welcome back to Ladies Who Launch, provided by Volt Credit Union. Our next segment is sponsored by BKD, CPA, and Advisors, and they're giving you a chance to win an incredible Ladies Love Springfield gift basket, and it is full of some amazing things. I'm going to read this. You can win gift cards from Acacia, Progress, the Uptown Boutique, goodies from Brown Derby, and outside seats, or I'm sorry, not outside, courtside seats at the Lady Bears game. So get social, use the hashtag 417 Ladies Who Launch, and Biz417 will contact the winner tomorrow. Up next is Erica Smith, a partner with BKD, and she will introduce our next speaker. Erica is a member of BKD National Construction and Real Estate Group, and she specializes in tax and building construction services. Please help me give a warm welcome to Erica Smith.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's so great to be here. We've heard so many great stories and so much wisdom in this room today. We're so excited to be here. BKD is so happy to be an initial sponsor. This is our first year sponsoring the event. It's a great event. And I hope that next year, just like we've talked about, that all of this is over and that we'll all be together again, but virtually. Hello to everyone. In your swag bag, I hope that you found your BKD The Future is Inclusive pin. We are really excited at BKD to be starting a new initiative within our SKY initiative. So since 2014, BKD SKY initiative is our goal to emphasize and strengthen diversity that focuses on attracting and retaining and developing leaders at BKD. And through that, our goal is to identify biases, remove cultural barriers that prevent all of us from maximizing our potential. We strive to create an inclusive culture that leverages our differences while creating a level playing field for all of our team. There's no doubt that through greater diversity, varied backgrounds, and unique perspectives, we're better positioned to meet our clients' needs, to serve our communities, and innovate how we do business. As a firm, we have focused on changing behaviors, attitudes, and our culture. We are focused on enhancing an environment of inclusion so that together we can all be better. And that is why today I'm excited to introduce to you Coach Mox. She is a 19-year veteran of Division I women's basketball, including 4 seasons as a player at Hofstra and 4 coaching stops prior to Missouri State University. She became the first female African-American head coach at Missouri State and quickly put together one of the top debut basketball seasons in Division I history. The Lady Bears, as we all know, went 26-4 in the Missouri Valley regular conference season and won the title in 2020. This paved the way for Coach Mox to be named the Spalding Maggie Dixon Rookie Coach of the Year and the MVC Coach of the Year as voted by the Women's Basketball Coaches Association. Off the court, Coach Mox continues to advocate for her team, running her program Life After Basketball, where she partners with organizations to teach important life skills to young adults. Before she joins us on the stage, please turn your attention to the screen for a short video from the Lady Bears and Coach Mox.
Let's go. It's our time, our house, our state. Together on three. 1, 2, 3. Together. All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money on my mind, I can never get enough. And every time I step up in the building, everybody hands go up. And they are just enjoying this moment. How special this moment is. Cause all I do is win, win, win. And if you going in, put your hands in the air, make them say that. This is our house. Like we beat them by 100, we beat them by 100. Okay?
Gotta do something. Here's a 3-ball by Manning. Got it! Oh my God, Manning!
Lobbing low left now to Franklin. Spins in on Nolan. Puts the shot up and in for the win.
The consistency going, the energy, the effort, everything has to stay the same for 40 minutes.
Near side now. Caleb will try her hand at a 3. And it's good for Bryce Caleb. And another block. Here's Ruffridge for 3 more. And it goes. And Willard left wide open. Don't ever leave Alexa Willard wide open.
All I do is win, 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 no matter what. Got money.
Caleb, lots of traffic. Got it. And a Mizzou foul.
Building, everybody hands go up. We gotta punch first, right? And they keep punching. And they stay there. And they say yeah.
Corner 3 for the tie is good. Hip trying to post up on Wolf. There is a career high 15 for Abby Hip.
Big turnaround.
Wow, no call there either way. Count it for Gardner.
Make sure we set the tone from the beginning, right?
Gardner can shoot those from outside, knocks it in.
Ellis bombs away. The bank is open.
In for Schultz off and in.
For the cross, Knapp loads up another 3. Wow.
To the corner to Ruffridge. Does she still have it? Yes.
Open 3 right side. Wilson hit it and a foul.
Look at the motor that drives Franklin and is rewarded by Caleb's eyes up in transition. So good.
Missouri State shooting the lights out here at JQH Arena. Mike Maya-Bennar got it started.
Do is win, 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 no matter what. Thank you. That video kind of gets me hype. I'm ready for the season right now. You know, last year was just an amazing ride. I'm just so excited about this year. But thank you, Biz 417, 417 Magazine, BKD, everybody that's involved with this great event, just for having me be here. I'm super honored and just humbled to be here. So I just want to thank you guys. And thank you for everyone that's here, everyone that's streaming. Wish you guys were here as well, because first of all, the camera adds 10 pounds and I look better in person. But no, seriously, because I'm a people person. I just like to interact and see everybody's face. But I know we have a lot of people streaming, and I just want to say thank you for you guys, your support as well. I also want to talk about real quickly, we have a new staff here. We made some changes this summer, and I'm super excited about this group. You know, 2 of them are here. Actually, 1 is a returner, but we have 2 new people on our coaching staff. So I just want to shout them out real quick. 1, Tori Jankoska, she's over there. She was with us last year, was an integral part of our success. She's played at Michigan State, the all-time leading scorer in the school's history. She was a top 10 WNBA draft pick, so she's a phenomenal player and coach. The other one is one of our newbies, but she's not new to me. Coach Bond, Elisha Bond. She's one of my best friends in the world, really like a sister to me. We worked together at Michigan State. She's also been all over the place, Tennessee, Wisconsin, Arizona, Texas Tech. So she comes with a tremendous experience, but she's just a phenomenal human being and that has a magnetic personality. And then the other one, he's not here because this is geared, you know, towards women, but he's supporting and streaming from home. His name is CJ Jones, and he comes with a wealth of experience as well on the women's side and the men's side, most notably in the NBA. He was a coach or a player development coach in NBA for 5 years. So I'm just very excited about our group, our coaching staff, our synergy, our camaraderie already. We've been working together for a couple of months now. But also just excited about the synergy between our team, our players, and then the connection between our staff and our players. I just think that, you know, I feel tremendously blessed just to be a part of Missouri State and the Lady Bears program, the historical program that it is. And I truly believe that God brought me here. You know, we have a special group and we have a special thing going. I'm just so optimistic for the future, you know, and it's funny, people always ask when they hear you're a coach and things like that, people that are not as familiar with collegiate athletics, you know, they're, okay, you're a coach, well, what else do you do? Like, do you have another job? And I'm like, do you know how much of a full-time job this is? I mean, we work really, really hard, but not only, you know, just my job description. I mean, there's so much that goes into it that people don't understand. There's recruiting, there's scouting, there's equipment, there's scheduling, there's travel. There's so many things that we have to do on a daily basis that just pack our schedule. But, you know, for me, my job is even way more than that. I mean, honestly, I'm a coach, I'm a mentor, I'm a psychologist, you know, I'm all of the above. But what I really take pride in is my job, you know, being the kind of person I am, I guess, in my position. To me, my job is to inspire, you know, to build up, to give confidence, ultimately to empower. And that's what I want to talk about a lot today. Our young people, but also our staff, you know, and anybody that works within our program. So I take that very seriously. I just think that, you know, this generation that's coming up needs to be different. And I think it's my job. I think I'm doing a disservice to them if they just come, you know, to Missouri State and they learn basketball stuff, but they don't learn anything about life or themselves. So my biggest thing is just getting them to believe in themselves, getting them to bet on themselves, you know, because at the end of the day, people aren't going to always bet on you, you know, and I want them to feel that they have, you know, the power to impact change or the power to, you know, impact their communities, and their voices can be heard no matter what, that they matter. That's super important to me. So, you know, the old school of thought, I guess you could say, with coaches is, you know, at least when I was coming up, we can't give confidence, we can't take confidence away. They either have it or they don't. They need to find it, you know, and I completely disagree with that. You know, I think as a coach, especially a head coach, but any coach, you can take confidence away and you can give confidence. And I choose to, you know, do the latter. I want to give confidence. I want to help mold these ladies that come in, and when they leave, they're women that are ready to take on the world, ready to go after that job, ready to believe in themselves. So I take that role very, very seriously, and I think our players, they understand that, and they buy in because of my philosophy when it comes to people in general. So my philosophy when it comes to our players, but this goes for anybody out there, like, you know, your employees, whoever it is that you're trying to motivate, empower, or anything. Mine is, you know, people always talk about, it's tough love, just work through it, especially in athletics, work through it, get through it, you know, push through whatever it is. But I switch the two, and I always talk about love tough. And to me, I think the love has to come before the toughness. And again, this applies not just to athletics, it applies to everybody. If people understand that you care, they're more likely to follow. So as a leader, you know, I pride myself on having great relationships with my players, my staff, everybody. But it's because of that love tough mentality. So if you set a foundation of love, obviously, but trust, loyalty, respect, being genuine, all of that stuff, a safe place for them to come, no judgment zone, then at the end of the day, people are more likely to follow or be motivated or push themselves out of their comfort zone. So that's how I approach it with our team. And when I got here, you know, we had a lot of broken kids. We did, you know, a lot of kids that didn't believe in themselves, a lot of kids that were, you know, didn't believe that they could get an A in that class, or didn't believe that they could make that shot on the court, didn't believe that they had a place in this society, that, you know, they could voice their own opinion, didn't believe that they mattered, really. I'm not saying all of them, but there was a lot of kids like that. So my first thing when I got this job was to build them up, you know, for them to believe in themselves, for them to gain that confidence back, because I want them to leave here and be ready to attack, you know, the world. And I think if, you know, if we don't do that, then why are we really in the business of helping young people? So I think this goes hand in hand with admitting that everybody, women especially, has insecurities, self-doubt, self-conscious issues. We all have them. You got that voice in your head that says you're not good enough, or somebody's telling you you're not good enough, maybe to get that job, or maybe to get that position or raise, or whatever it is. We all have it. I mean, even Hillary Clinton, she talked about it in one of her books. Everybody has that, you know, but it's how you respond to that voice in your head, or how you respond to people telling you no. You know, how do you go about pushing through those barriers? And that's what I want to teach our kids, and that's what I have been teaching them, because at the end of the day, you know, you learn from failures. You know, success happens from failures. Success happens from being denied. Success happens from being told no, things like that. So if they push, or if I push them out of their comfort zone, or they take that step, take a risk to just be better than they could even imagine, or go after something they could never imagine they could do, and they fail, it's okay. It's okay. You learn from that and you come back stronger. So, you know, you can't set limitations on yourself because you have that little voice in your head, or you have somebody telling you no. You have to continue to just bet on yourself. You know, as women, you know, and I know there's some men, including my assistant coach, watching, but it is a male-dominated world. And if you're a woman, you have a strike against you already. And if you're a minority woman, you have 2 strikes against you. So you need to be even more aggressive and even more confident to be seen and heard in a male-dominated world. You know, it's super important. So those are the messages I try to get through to them. And, you know, there's a quick story I want to tell. This actually just happened recently. One of our players, you know, I definitely pride myself on having good relationships with our players and having a pulse on them and understanding, you know, if somebody's up today, they're down today, whatever it is. And one of our players, you know, I had a conversation with her. We had a meeting last week, and she was just having some anxiety. She was stressed out, just really just with the uncertainty of everything that's going on in the world. The pandemic, you know, the social and racial injustices, which I'm going to get to in a little bit, just everything that's going on in the world, she was really struggling with that. And so I, you know, brought her in, we were talking, you know, I was just trying to give her different coping mechanisms. I was trying to listen. I was trying to offer guidance the best I could. And at the end of the conversation, she was telling me, she said, you know, I actually feel a lot better. I really appreciate that. And I said, okay, you know, that's good. And she said, I always feel better when we talk. And I said, that's awesome. Like, that's why I'm here for you and all that stuff. She said, it's crazy because I always wait till it's like I'm at my wit's end, and then I'm like, let me just go talk to Coach Mox, even though we have a lot of conversations. So I'm like, well, when you start getting anxious and stressed out, why don't you just come then, rather than, you know, when it's at an all-time high. And she said to me, you know, when I look at you, it's like you're perfect. And I was like, what? And she was just, you know, you're perfect. She said, you're strong, you're independent, you know, you always have the right answers, you know how to make us feel better. She didn't say understand yet. She said you are there for us when we need you and things like that. And she's like, so I'm always thinking, like, she won't understand. She won't be able to relate to what I'm going through. She doesn't have those same thoughts. Like, she's just so confident and, you know, things like that. And I was like, you know, wow. Well, like, I mean, obviously that's a compliment coming from her, but at the same time, you know, my first reaction was what anybody's reaction would be, with nobody's perfect. You know, I told her that. I was like, nobody's perfect except for him in my eyes. And, you know, I just told her, I was like, I obviously am older than you, and I have had some trials and tribulations in my life where maybe I've gone through some of the things you've gone through, or maybe I've helped others get through it, or maybe I've seen others get through it, maybe I've talked to people. So I have a way of thinking or forming a solution, or maybe even directing you to the right person that can help you through that because of experiences. And so it's not that I have all the answers. You know, I have a little bit more wisdom than you and a little bit more experience, and that's what I wanted her to understand. And she got that, but at the same time, she still has this vision of me. And I went on to tell her about, you know, 12 years ago when I lost the person in this world that knew me before I even came in this world, which was my mother. You know, and that was the worst time in my life, still is the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And to me, in my eyes, my mother was the closest thing to perfect. And I'm sure she had all the, insecurities and all the doubt in her head and all that stuff. But to me, she was such a powerful woman that I just wanted to emulate everything that she did. And I feel blessed to have had her for as long as I did. But at the same time, I know that there was times where she had self-doubt and she had to turn to people, and there was times where she had to work through stuff. But, to me, she was, she saved lives as her profession because she was a surgeon. But then she also saved lives just by doing God's work, just by being a genuine, honest, loving person. So when she was taken from this earth and out of my life, of course, I was down and out, you could even say depressed. I went through hard times. I just, it wasn't a good place in my life. And so I was sharing this with my player, and I was just like, but, at the same time, one thing my mother always taught me is, like, you can choose to listen to those voices that are telling you you're sad or your woe is me, or you can just be blessed you could just feel blessed for everything you have and not take things for granted and just keep moving, keep going forward, and just keep trying to impact lives. So that helped me get through that dark time, but it's still something that I deal with every night. Sometimes I'll wake up crying just because I miss my mother, especially when I had my son, and when I got married, all the things that we talked about growing up. But we all go through those times, and I think that sometimes young people, they look at us, especially those in positions of authority, and they put us on this pedestal and don't think that we understand what they're going through. And the thing is, with young people today, their worth is wrapped up in whatever they're doing. So if they're playing basketball, they have a bad game, life is over, they can't move on from that. Or if they put up a post on social media and they get 10 likes, and life is over, So whatever it is they're doing, that is what their worth is wrapped up in. So my message when I talk to them, it's not about what everybody thinks about you. It's about you believing in yourself, and my job is to help them continue to believe in themselves and continue to be prepared for life. Because once they get out of this little bubble of college athletics, where we tell them what we're eating today, this is your food, when the bus is leaving, when the plane is leaving, when we play games, when you have your class schedule, when practice is, all that stuff, when they get out of that, we don't want them to have a culture shock. So that kind of goes hand in hand with our life skills program that we do, which is called LAB, Life After Ball. And this is really important to me, and it's really important to our players. They're so appreciative of this program. And we've had mental health training, and obviously I have partnered with people to come in and talk about this stuff. We've had mental health training, we've had sleep training, we've had cooking classes that have turned into, that was a sleep training. We've had cooking classes that turned in kind of to like that show Chopped competition, because at the end of the day, we're athletes, we're competitive. But we've had all kinds of things. Clinique came in and talked about skincare. We've had self-defense lined up. We've had financial ones, because kids don't even think about budgeting, investing, savings, things like that. All kinds of proper ways to clean. So, whatever skills we feel like they need just to be able to be independent and succeed in society on their own, we want to expose them to it while they're in college, where we can help mold them and prepare them for the future. So that is something that I actually want to challenge everybody that's listening, people that are here listening. It's a really important program, and I just want people to continue to reach out and help grow our young people. We have to be able to change this generation coming up. So if anybody, whatever your skill set may be, I know we have a lot of successful people in the room and listening. If anybody wants to be a part of that, and you think that you can offer something to our student athletes, we definitely welcome that. And I will say real quick, if you do, please email our Director of Operations. Her name is Michaela Krall, and I'll be able to put this on the website, I guess, but mcrall@missourastate.edu, and she'll be able to connect you guys with that. But we do a lot just to make sure that we are continuing to set them up for success. So my biggest thing is, it's when it comes to empowerment, you have to bet on yourself. You have to establish a foundation of respect, love, loyalty, a genuine relationship before you can lead anybody. You know, no one's going to follow you if they don't believe in you. They just, or don't believe that you care about them, or even believe in you. So, you know, with our players, that's kind of the way that I approach them. Now, as I challenge you guys to do more, some do a lot, some do a little, in our community and with our young people, that kind of moves us into another subject, which is racial injustices, and just the climate of what our country is in right now. And, you know, this subject, it requires a lot of empathy, it requires compassion, and it requires sensitivity. And that's so important because you have to, everybody needs to be educated. Some are more educated than others, but you have to be able to understand the pain that the African American community has been enduring, the oppression that Black people have endured, you know, the systemic racism that Black people have endured. All these, there's facts, you know, these are facts. And you have to approach this with a level of sensitivity, because right now, you know, sensitivity is at its all-time high. Obviously, with the recent, you know, events, I mean, this is stuff that's been going on before there was cameras, you know, and then even when there were cameras. So with the recent events of, you know, obviously George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, the list goes on, the sensitivity is at an all-time high. And so, you know, the saying that we've heard a lot lately with, you know, the unaffected have to be as outraged as the affected for there to be some kind of implementation of change. And I think, you know, that's what we're seeing now. That's really what we're seeing now, and that's why I'm very optimistic about the direction we're going and the change that's happening in our country right now. But pertaining to our program, when all of that stuff started going on, there's protests, you know, there's uncertainty along with the pandemic. It was a lot, especially it's a lot for everybody, you, me, adults, everyone. But young people, it's a lot for them to handle. Some understand, some don't understand, some can relate, some can't, some have experienced, some haven't. So it was important to me to bring our team together. And this was actually via Zoom because of the pandemic. I wish it was in person. But to bring them together and offer them, you know, a continued safe place where there was a no judgment zone. People felt like they mattered. People felt like, you know, they had a voice, they could voice their opinion. And that's what happened. And it was a very powerful thing because our African American students, they expressed some of their experiences. They expressed their frustration. I expressed some of my experiences and my frustration. And, you know, our white student athletes or other races, now they had seen a lot of this stuff on TV, had been some confused by it, some upset by it, you know, bothered, but at the same time, it was kind of further away from them because they're watching it on TV. It didn't affect anyone in their direct circle. So when they were listening to some of this stuff, there were some tears, but there was also some people becoming outraged because now this is happening to their sister, somebody they can consider a sister. So it was actually very powerful, and that's why I want to just continue with the education on that, because some just don't know, you know, or some don't know what it's like. Maybe they know, they don't understand. So it's important to change the next generation and to empower people to speak up, use their voice. You matter, no matter whatever your race or ethnicity or whatever it is. And this movement, when you talk about Black Lives Matter, you know, some people are offended by that, and everybody, you know, is entitled to their own opinion for sure. But let me just try and explain, because the goal is to educate. So I can easily say white lives matter, equality, all lives matter, Hispanic lives matter, Asian lives matter, because I genuinely believe that. I genuinely believe that. I was blessed to have parents that raised me without having a prejudiced heart, no judgment in my heart, You know, you don't judge people on how they look. You know, it's about the person's soul, their character, you know, how they carry themselves, whatever it is. Not everybody's blessed to be raised that way, so I understand that. But black lives are the ones that are in danger right now. Black lives are the ones that are being subjected to police brutality or people using their authority the wrong way, and that's targeted towards black people. When it's a black life, it's more of a shoot to kill mentality. Apprehend is kind of like, okay. When it's a white life, it's more of a apprehend first, shoot to kill is the last resort. And we just need to change that whole mentality, because there's people that are being killed that have families. You know, I have a family, I have a son, I have a husband, I have a brother, I have a father, I have cousins. I also have black females in my family. Obviously, I am a black female. So it's a very disheartening thing to live in fear, you know, especially with the current climate now. My husband goes out, who's to say he's going to come back? And I know I'm not saying there's other things that can be fatal. Right now, COVID's fatal. A car accident can be fatal. There's so many things, but the social part of this and the systemic part of this, we need to fix. And so, you know, it's disheartening because, you know, people in my family or just black people, you know, you're one encounter away with the wrong person of authority that may racially profile you to just being killed. You know, and it's because of the color of your skin. So that's why it's Black Lives Matter. Doesn't mean that other lives don't matter, because they do, but other lives are not being targeted right now. So if we have a breast cancer awareness game that we do every year in support of breast cancer, which is really important to me. My mother passed away from that. But when you're doing breast cancer, you're at an event where you're supporting breast cancer, you're not really talking about brain cancer or liver cancer or bone marrow cancer. When you go to those events, you're not talking about breast cancer or whatever it is. I mean, you're focusing on the issue at hand, right? So when you're talking about Black Lives Matter and trying to get equality, you're not talking about everyone, because not everybody is affected in that way. And so that's why the unaffected have to be as outraged as the affected in order to see change. So that is why it's important to say Black Lives Matter. We do, again, at least me, I'm speaking for myself, I agree that all lives matter. I'm just going to continue to reiterate that. But we need Black lives to matter. That's super important. I mean, when you think about this, I mean, just 56 years ago, Civil Rights Act, you know, was put in place. So just 56 years ago, which is not, I mean, there might be there's people in here that are 56 years old, people listening, there's people older than that. My parents were in their late teens at that time. Just 56 years ago, I wouldn't be able to go to the same school as my assistant coach, Tori Jane Costa. I wouldn't be able to eat in the same restaurants because of the color of my skin, you know, and that's not a long time. Now, we've come a long way. Now, I'm the first African-American female coach of any sport at Missouri State, and you know, that is a blessing. That's why I think God brought me here. I think I have to continue to use that platform, and I will. We're going to do a lot of things in the community. We're working on something right now that's going to be pretty big. It'll be advertised soon. So I'm going to continue to do my part. But I'm the affected. You know, the unaffected has to step up what they're doing, and that's what we're seeing now. And that's why we're seeing changes. We're seeing laws and things like that. But 56 years ago is not a long time. It really isn't. And you think about in 1965 when Juneteenth came around, June 19th, before this year, a lot of people didn't even know what June 19th meant, Freedom Day. They didn't know what that meant, you know, because it's not being taught in schools. It's a big part of our history, you know. So I just think that, you know, one, I'm a very proud African-American woman. I love my heritage. I love where I'm from. I would not change it for the world. But when I was born, I wasn't in a test tube and they said swim left if you want to be black and swim right if you want to be white. It wasn't like that. I was born into this world the same way as you, same way as you, same way as people listening. We all came in the same way. It wasn't a choice we made. So why do I get judged on the color of my skin? And why do I have less opportunities because of the color of my skin? Why was I not allowed to vote? Because you guys imagine living in a country, but you don't have a say on who your leadership is going to be. You know, you're not allowed to vote. You're not allowed to eat in this restaurant. You're not allowed to go to school. Why? We were all born the same way. And if you're a Christian, I'm not saying you have to be, but I'm a Christian. I have a strong foundation in faith in Lord, God-fearing woman, and I think that's why I'm able to impact lives, because God put me here to do that. I believe he put my mother here to do that, and I take a lot of pride in that. But it says, you know, love thy neighbor. It doesn't say love your white neighbor or love your black neighbor. It says love thy neighbor. We're all one under God. So it's important that those aren't just words that we say. It's important that those become actions. And so that's why I challenge people to do more. And some are doing a lot. You know, some are not doing a little bit. And, you know, there's people out there that have good hearts, you know, don't have any prejudice in their heart at all, you know. But when they watch some of this stuff, they feel like, yeah, that's terrible that's happening. But I know I'm not racist, or I know I don't judge people, so it has nothing to do with me. And that's where they stand. Well, the unaffected have to be as outraged as the affected. So it doesn't mean everybody needs to go protest. Doesn't mean you need to be speaking out about it. But support change in this country for the next for our generation and the next generation. So whether it's donating to causes, talking to young people, coming and helping me and talking to my young people, our team, helping in your community, voting. That should have been the first thing I said. You know, whatever it is, even just supporting friends and families behind the scenes and letting them know that you love them, you're there for them. There's so many ways that you can support if you truly believe that equality matters. I just think that this is again, it's a sensitive subject, but it's a subject that needs to be talked about. And I believe that, you know, now coming after a year of being here, I believe that that's one of the reasons why I was brought here. And I know I'm going to continue to do my part in the community. I know I'm going to continue to do my part with our community and our Lady Bears family, because it's important. Our program, I'm so blessed that we have a safe place. We don't have any of that. We have people from all walks of life in our program, on our staff, our players. But, you know, they look at the leader of the program and how does she feel, or what is she doing about this? And again, I'm going to continue to do my part. But I think it's, you know, being silent. And I will be honest with you, when all this started happening, you know, and the protests started happening and people putting statements out on social media, I'll be 100% transparent. It took me about a week before I put a statement out on social media because I was nervous. I was nervous. I have a son. I have a husband. I'm in a predominantly white community, which is not a problem to me, but you don't know where people's hearts lie. So if I start speaking out, maybe I'll be okay because I'm the coach, but what's going to happen to my son and my husband? So we did a lot of praying about it, but I think, again, that's why I was brought here, and I feel like, you know, it's something that I'm going to take a lot of pride in, and there's something that I'm going to continue to do, because I just think that it's a subject that people don't like to really talk about. You know, people feel uncomfortable, and so we got to be comfortable. We got to be comfortable talking about it. My husband's always fully in support, and he's always pushing me to, you know, use my voice and to continue to help the community. So that's what I plan to do. So again, I'm looking at the time. I actually had a few other things I want to say, but I know we got to kind of stay on track. But, you know, empowering young women is a passion of mine. You know, I coach, I'm super competitive, I want to win, but the fundamental reason why I coach is a mentorship piece and the relationship piece, and that's what fills me up. So empowering young women, that's a huge thing, a huge goal and a huge part of my job. Inspiring, giving confidence, building them up, getting them to bet on themselves, even when other people don't, getting them to bounce back when they hit adversity or failures and things like that. It's super important to me. And then also now, especially in this climate, just empowering everyone to step out of their comfort zone a little bit. You know, that's when change happens. That's when success happens. Step out of your comfort zone a little bit and be a part, impact change in our community. And then that'll just trickle on to the next community, the next community, the next community, the country, the state, the world, whatever. But we have to all continue to do our part, and we have to be educated and understand what the fight is right now. Understand what the message is right now and be a part of change. So that's what I want to leave you with. I really do appreciate everyone's time. Please continue to support our program. We're doing great things. We have a great group of kids. A lot of you guys have met some of them, and they're phenomenal people, and they're going to be future leaders in our world. So I thank you guys a lot, and everybody remain blessed.
Thank you, Coach Mox. Your genuine honesty really speaks to our spirit and challenges us, and we are so glad that you're in Springfield. Up next, we have a little bit of a break. For those of you who are watching virtually right now, you can go in your kitchen and grab your snack. For those of you who are sitting here at these tables, we have a snack for you over on the side of the room. And I just want to remind everyone to use hashtag 85,000, and 1,000 is spelled out, Sparks, and that is spelled out. Show us your socks, and remember what our presenting sponsor from Bolt reminded us at the beginning. So we'll take a quick break. Thank you.
part of anything is to begin.
The spark in the dark night, the blossom braving winter's end.
But believe, conceive, and achieve.
You'll never know what's possible
until you're brave enough to find out.
So let go.
And though you may have nothing to hold on to,
there will be nothing to hold you back.
So live free
and live in motion.
Hello and welcome back to Ladies Who Launch, presented by Volt Credit Union. Thank you for staying with us all day and staying engaged. We have heard from Nancy Allen. We have heard from our Leading Through a Crisis panel, and we just heard from Coach Mox. Up next, introducing our keynote speaker for the day is Loretta Roney, the president and CEO of Volt Credit Union. She leads her organization with over 20 years of banking experience. She has a degree in accounting and a degree with a master's of business administration. She serves on many boards in a lot of different capacities, but just to give you a few ideas, she serves on the Women's Association of Credit Union Leaders. She also works with Vistage Worldwide Network, and she locally sits on the board of Midwest Financial. Loretta serves on the Young Advocate Council for the Children Advocacy Center, and she will be in Leadership Springfield Class 40 this fall. She resides here in Springfield with her husband Jeremy and 2 children, Isabella and Alec. We can't thank Loretta enough for supporting this initiative and helping all of our women continue to launch. Please help me welcome Loretta Roney to the stage.
Good afternoon again. This has been such a fun event, and I have loved hearing from all of these ladies in 417 land. They're so inspiring. The things that we're doing in this community are amazing. I'm so just grateful to be a part of it. Today, you guys already heard from me earlier about 85,000 Sparks, and I'm appreciative of 417 who continues to talk about that through the day, because we want to continue to support these 3 charities today. Again, go to hashtag 85K Sparks to make your donation and to post a picture of you in your socks. I had the pleasure of speaking with our keynote today a little bit ahead of time, and I can tell you she is amazing. At this time, I'm excited to be announcing Amy Blankson. She is the New York Times best-selling author, motivational researcher of happiness, and as a happiness expert. She's a Harvard grad, a TEDx speaker. Amy Blankson's best-selling author of The Future of Happiness is the only person to receive a Point of Light Award from 2 sitting U.S. presidents. After graduating from Harvard and Yale School of Management, she has focused her work on understanding how to cultivate happiness in a digital era. She is a member of the UN Global Happiness Council, a fellow of the World Innovation Organization, and is currently working with the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers to create standards for well-being in the creation of artificial intelligence and emotional awareness. We'll do a live Q&A at the end with Amy, so make sure to ask your questions on Facebook Live or by using the hashtag 417LadiesWhoLaunch on Twitter. Joining us live from Dallas, I'm excited via Zoom to introduce Miss Amy Blankson.
Hello, Biz 417, and thank you so much, Loretta and Volt Credit Union, for making it possible for me to join you virtually for this important event that you're having today. I wish I could be there with you in person, but this opportunity to share research that is near and dear to my heart is very welcome. Today, I get to talk with you about a topic that is near and dear to my heart, and it's one I've been thinking about for quite some time: fearless positivity. Now, I started thinking about this topic in 2019 in response to research that said that Americans were increasingly unhappy, and I was wondering why. There was more fear in the world. And I had actually pitched this idea to my editor on January 4th of this year to write an entire book on fearless positivity. And after much emotional and mental investment in creating this book proposal and I handing it to my editor, he said, "You know, I think that you need to think about this one a little bit more." And I thought, oh, are you kidding me? I've been thinking about it and thinking about it. And I walked away from that meeting so discouraged. And then I was discouraged because I was writing about fearless positivity. And yet that's exactly how I felt. But in retrospect, I am so glad that he asked me to go back to the drawing board and think a little more, because truly everything that I thought I understood about fearless positivity has been flipped on its head in 2020. Today, I join you not as a positive psychologist who says, "Oh, don't worry, be happy," but really as an entrepreneur, as a mother, as a spouse, as an individual who is working hard to apply everything I know from the field of positive psychology and put it into practice in my life. And I'm excited to share that research with you today, because earlier this month, we actually found that a new study was released that said that Americans are more unhappy than they have been in the past 50 years. Wow. It's no surprise that between COVID and protest and supply chain upheaval and the arrival of murder hornets, that there's this plethora of fear and uncertainty. And yet here we find ourselves in this era of so much fear that we don't know what to do with it. And so we keep thinking, okay, well, I'll be happy when, say, the pandemic is over, or I'll be happy when things go back to normal in our lives, or I'll be happy when school is in session, right? But I have to say that research that I've learned from the field of positive psychology has begun to shift the way that I think about statements like this: "I'll be happy when." And I'm learning how I can truly thrive in the midst of change. And so as I'm thinking about how I can show up as a leader in the world, to be a thought leader in the space of positive psychology, I'm beginning to pull in the research that I've learned actually from my brother. My brother, Sean Acor, is a positive psychologist who way back in 2006 had been the head teaching fellow for a course at Harvard called The Science of Happiness. Now, this was a new course, and it was a naturally fascinating topic, but nobody expected that this course would go on to become the most popular course in the history of Harvard, with more than 1 in every 4 students taking this course. No one expected that organizations outside of Harvard would suddenly show such a tremendous interest that my brother came to me, and I just finished business school at that time, and he said, "Amy, I think I want to start a business to bring the research of positive psychology out to companies." And so I gave him this skeptical eye. You know, I'm the little sister, and as much as I love being bossy and welcome that opportunity to tell him what to do, I wasn't sure about starting a company in the midst of the greatest economic downturn since the Great Depression. And so he took a moment and he sat and he started to tell me all the reasons why he felt like the research was most needed at that time. It was most needed so that we could begin to transform lives at a time when people need the information. Because typically it takes anywhere from 10 to 20 years for research to go from the ivory tower or the academic lab into practice. People needed the information right away. And so I remember that day we started Good Think. It's a positive psychology consulting firm. And within just 2 years, we had spoken in more than 50 different countries, from everywhere from Dubai, we'd spoken in Tokyo, we'd spoken in South Africa, we'd spoken in the Middle East, and we'd spoken in organizations from the White House, the NBA, the Federal Reserve, you name it. The industries were vastly different. The economics of the groups we talked to were different. The races of the people that we spoke to were different. And yet, no matter where we went, the research of positive psychology resonated with individuals who were looking for a deeper understanding of what was going on at that point in history and time. And I think behind this research was really this idea that flipped everything on its head. And it said that everything we understood about success was leading to this idea of if we work hard enough, then we'll finally be, happy because we'll have everything that we've been working so hard for. And in fact, what the research shows is that happiness leads to success, not the other way around. And I'll get to this a bit more in just a little bit, but to give you more of the backstory, I think the key to this research was that a positive mindset was found to be the single greatest competitive advantage in the modern economy, with more than 50% of the Fortune 500 companies that we know of today coming out of the recession of the 1980s. Mindset matters. It matters so much. And so if I were to ask you, okay, so what do you think of, or when I ask you to think of like who would be a fearless leader in your mind, you might think of some of the women who embody fearless positivity that you see on the screen. Now it's Malala or Ruby Bridges, maybe Sally Ride, Mother Teresa. But the truth is that all of these women who come to mind had fear. They had lots of fear. So it's not that they were actually fearless. So then my question is, well, what qualities do make a fearless leader? And that's a bit of a different question because it opens up questions like, well, can you be fearless and not positive? Well, absolutely. So what does it mean to choose to be fearlessly positive? And when I think of these qualities, the best way I can describe it to you is through this video here. And my screen looks a little bit different from yours, but hopefully it's pulling up on your end of the screen. See if it is. Looks like there might be. Here we go. That's amazing, right? I just love this video. I think we have a technical difficulty. I can't see the slides moving on my end, but I hope that you can see that amazing video of the little girl who is working so hard to begin to rise above, to face her fear of jumping on this little stool. That for me is fearless positivity. And when I think about quotes that really resonate for me, Franklin Delano Roosevelt once said that courage is not the absence of fear, but rather the assessment that something else is more important than fear, which is amazing, right? It's worth noting that when we talk about being fearless, we're not talking about doing daring things like skydiving or swimming with sharks just for the sake of a challenge. Rather, we're talking about overcoming our fears when it really matters, facing the future with optimism for the sake of our employees, for our families, for ourselves. Why are we choosing to be fearless? What makes us fearlessly positive? It's about overcoming challenges that we're facing. Because sometimes when we're faced with a difficult situation, right, how do we typically respond? Well, sometimes we feel like the situation might be so pervasive that there's nothing we can do about it. And other times we pretend that we're just fearless and we're just going to ignore that this problem exists, right? But the truth is that problems come hand in hand with fear. We have to find a better way of facing our fears. I think sometimes it helps to think through some of the reasons why optimism is not our default reaction to difficult situations. Negativity is a learned emotion, right? One that gains strength through experiences, and maybe something didn't go well in the past, and so we think, you know what, I've been there, I've done that, I tried it, it didn't work. And so we begin to reject positivity in the present. Or maybe you hesitate to choose optimism because you fear not being taken too seriously. Like maybe you're afraid that you'll be too Pollyanna-ish, or that you won't be cautious enough. Or maybe you're just not feeling it, which is okay too. we don't always feel like we're fearlessly positive, and that's okay. But I think sometimes it does help to look back at moments in our lives when we did deal well with fearless positivity, and we can begin to pull some of those strategies that we've used in the past by leveraging what we've learned in our lives. And for me, one of those times was when my husband was in the military and he was getting his first duty station. And so he was putting in a list of the top 20 places that we could potentially live for our first duty station. And, you know, as a new military spouse, my mind was reeling with all these possibilities like Hawaii, Germany, maybe we'll go to South Korea. I was so excited to travel and see the world. And about 10,000th place on my list was the base in Biloxi, Mississippi. But as things would have it, that is exactly where we got sent, to Biloxi. My mom always told me to bloom where we're planted. So I remember that my husband and I packed up the moving truck and we tried to make the best of things. We bought our very first home and we got a cute little puppy. And we were really beginning to enjoy Mississippi. I was so surprised at how much I just fell in love with the community and the people and the area. And we had been there for all of 3 months when Hurricane Katrina hit. And in the span of just 3 days, I lost my dog, I lost my house, I lost my community, I lost my sense of hope. I had no idea where I'd be living, what I'd be doing, when I would live in the same state with my husband again. There were so many unknowns. And when I think back to that time, I think of this particular Photoshop artist whose name is Chino Otsuka. And Chino Otsuka photoshops pictures of herself as an adult into photos of herself as a child. So each photo you see there on the screen is herself as an adult and a child. And it's phenomenal because she has this theme of what I wish I knew back then. And when I think back to my time on the Gulf Coast, what I wish I had known back then was the research of Sonia Lyubomirsky. She's a preeminent positive psychology researcher who found that if you can tell me how much money you make, where you live, and maybe how many pets you have, I can accurately predict your happiness levels by exactly 10%. Because the other 90% of your happiness is actually up to your genes and your perception of your situation, not your environment. Now, what this means is that if there was a room of 100 people in that room, that maybe 10 of you would have a very similar recollection of what I'm saying right now, and the other 90% of you would have completely different ideas and memories of what I just said, which is phenomenal. It means that we all process the world in different ways, and it's because we're looking for different information in our environments. Our brains are like blinding snowstorms, right? We have 11 million bits of information flying at us. Imagine that snow just piling in your face all at the same time. 11 million bits every single second. But our brain is a single processor, which means that we can actually only process 40 bits of information at any given time, which means that if your brain is always looking for 40 bits of negativity, it's going to miss out on the 10 million plus other bits of information that could actually change your perception of the world. That even though you begin to see the world one way and you feel like it's truth, that our reality is actually far more complex than we ever imagined, and we have a capacity to choose. So when I think back at that time in the Gulf Coast, that information would be so helpful. But we're living in a time now where this information can yet again be helpful in our lives. And I want you to think of that moment in the past where maybe you dug deep and you figured out something that would help you now to deal with the uncertainty we're facing in our current lives. When we're facing these challenges, how do you deal with those situations, these stressors? Well, it turns out that our brains actually process this information in two different ways. When we hear information in our brain, oftentimes we revert to fight or flight, which we often hear about as a very defensive mechanism in our body that raises our cortisol levels, causes us to have headaches, backaches, stress, not being able to sleep. And it turns out that that information is all processed in the amygdala of the brain, in the rear part of your brain, which actually processes challenges in our environment as threats. And so your body responds as such. But it turns out that if you can challenge yourself and challenge your brain to begin to think of this information as a challenge instead of as a threat, then all of a sudden your brain is able to process this information in the front of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, which actually processes information with logic instead. And all of a sudden, you've circumvented the stress response that your brain would normally have, decreasing your stress by up to 23%, which is phenomenal, right? So when I think about this, a very practical way for us to put this information into our lives is to actually have a challenge for ourselves, challenging information about what we do with our minds in terms of the situation. So for instance, if I stub my toe and I think, ow, that really hurt, what am I gonna do with that? All of a sudden, now I'm gonna challenge myself to say, you know, normally I would get angry and I'd think, why did I leave that weight in the middle of the room and then kick it with my toe? Now I'm gonna say, okay, well, I'm gonna try really hard to think one positive thought in the midst of this moment, or I'm gonna try to get over the pain just a little bit faster. And so by doing so, I'm now changing the region of my brain where I'm processing this information, which is phenomenal. So when we think about how we can begin to use this information, this particular topic is something that I use every single day in my life. It is something that helps me to develop a different way to use my brain to think about situations, because I have the agency and the control to begin to make those changes in my life. And so today I want to give you 3 tools that you can use to raise your levels of positivity. And those 3 tools are your mind, your voice, and your vision. Your mind, your voice, and your vision. So tool number 1 is your mind. And truly, your mind is the happiness, which I define by the ancient Greeks definition, which is the joy we feel striving after our potential. The joy we feel striving after our potential. And so when we're thinking about the mind, what's important to realize is that we've been taught our whole lives that our success is based on intelligence. That's why we used to do all these IQ tests back in the day. If you were really smart, well, then you'd be successful. Unfortunately, that is not necessarily the case. In fact, research today shows that there are 3 different factors which are far more important than IQ in terms of predicting your success. And those 3 factors are optimism levels, how you process stress, and the amount of social support that you provide to others. And I'm going to go through those a bit more in just a little bit, but it's so important to recognize that optimism is such an important factor shaping our overall success, not just intelligence and IQ. Turns out that an individual who has a positive brain has been found to have 37% higher sales, 3 times the levels of creativity, 31% more productivity. They're 40% more likely to receive a promotion. They're 23% less stressed. That's the fatigue response we just talked about. They're 10 times more engaged. They're 39% more likely to live to the age of 94. And they have 50% lower chance of heart disease. I mean, wow, right? That's phenomenal. So when we think about having a positive brain, all of a sudden, not only do you think, okay, obviously I want positivity. A positive mindset makes a lot of sense. But the problem is that there are negative people all around us. And immediately you start to think, okay, well, how can I buffer myself from the negativity around me? How can I buffer myself from those individuals who are constantly dragging me down, which can be a little bit awkward if that person is your child or your spouse or a coworker. But the idea is not that we necessarily shut ourselves off from negative individuals, but really figure out how do we bolster ourselves enough up so that those individuals don't affect our health and well-being. Because we know that just like secondhand smoke can spread, we also know that secondhand stress can spread to all of us. And so we're trying to buffer ourselves from negativity in a way by empowering ourselves to do better. And there's some easy ways to do this. I actually have a cheesy mnemonic that I call the J game that helps us to practice these positive habits. Now the J game stands for J for journaling, G for gratitude, A for acts of kindness, M for meditation, and E for exercise. And these 5 habits are 5 of the most well-researched information in our lives that have been found to be the fastest interventions for creating positivity and boost in our lives. What we know from research is that all of us have have different genetic set points. We all have different genetic set points for happiness at birth, but no matter where your genetic set point is, each and every single one of us can raise our genetic set point by practicing habits that create a work ethic to develop a choice of positivity in our lives. And I want to walk you through what I mean by each one of these habits so that you can perhaps think of one habit that you want to walk away from the session here today and begin to put into practice in your life. And I want to suggest that maybe you take 21 days to begin to practice this habit every single day. And the reason we picked 21 is it's the minimum length of time, according to research, needed to create a new lifelong habit. Could take anywhere up to 90 days, but I always like to shoot for the lowest positive difference that I can make, because that will make me feel like it's more achievable. So I want you to think about this, and I'm going to ask you, when I finish describing each one of these, which of the 5 habits would be most helpful to you in terms of creating positive change in your life, something that you're not already doing. So the first habit that I want to share with you is journaling. Now, journaling is just taking 2 minutes a day to write down a meaningful moment in your life that is something that happened in the last 24 hours. And I want you to write down what it is you were doing, who you were with, why that moment made a particular difference for you, and just maybe set a timer for 2 minutes so that you don't feel overwhelmed. You don't have to write pages. It could be bullet points. But the idea is that by writing this down by hand, your brain begins to relive this moment, and all of a sudden it's reliving the happiest moment of the last 24 hours. But it's also writing it down so that as you look back over it over time, all of a sudden you can begin to recall those moments, and you get this triple benefit of living it, remembering it, and going back to recall that moment. Journaling is incredibly powerful. The next habit is taking a moment for gratitude. And gratitude is thinking 3 things that you're grateful for, 3 new and different things that you're grateful for, and writing them down every day. And the idea behind gratitude is that you're beginning to use gratitude to scan your environment for new information. So if we go back to that image of the snowflakes, the blinding snowstorm, and your brain is typically maybe picks out some of the negative snowflakes in your environment. What gratitude is doing is helping you find new positive bits of information to begin to record in your life. So truly, we're beginning to see that if your brain tries to do one thing, then you can train it to do another. For instance, I know I can't look both left and right at the same time. I challenge you to try that. Look left and right. You cannot do both at the same time. The brain is the same way. You can't be both positive and negative at the same time. And so when you're training yourself to think of gratitudes, even for a brief moment, your brain is going to switch directions. You're using a new neural pathway. And if you do this enough, you begin to develop a habit that raises the genetic set point, even for individuals who would typically say they are more pessimistic types of individuals. Now, the third habit, acts of kindness, is doing something tiny to make someone else feel better in your environment. It begins to create a positive feedback loop between yourself and somebody else to strengthen connections. And typically what I'll recommend is that you make a list of 21 people in your life that that come to mind. It doesn't have to be any rhyme or reason. It could be family, friends, coworkers, neighbors, whoever comes to your mind. And I want you to pick the first person on the list. And I want you to send a text message to them, thanking or praising them for something that they've done in your life. For instance, when I did this, I actually wrote to my first grade teacher and I said, Mrs. Dominic, thank you for teaching me how to read. You are the reason why I became a writer today. So I just wanted to say thank you. Mrs. Dominic wound up writing me back. She had a photo attached of her reading my children's book to all of her first graders, along with this long note about what a difference I made to her back in first grade. And it was this incredible feedback loop that I never expected, but it made me happy, it made her happy, and it had a positive ripple effect. Today, you have an amazing opportunity to do something very similar, something that Volt Credit Union has made possible for you today by beginning to use the 85,000 Sparks hashtag and posting about your socks. I'm actually wearing my socks here today. I was going to show you on my feet, but it's a little awkward on a Zoom camera to try to get my foot up on the screen. So I'll spare you that moment. But I am wearing my happy socks. I hope that you do take the opportunity to snap a photo of your feet, show your sock pride, and begin to make a difference. I know with each photo that's posted with hashtag 85,000 Sparks that $5 is going to be donated to one of 3 women's charities, and that there's a matching grant of up to $5,000. That's phenomenal and such an easy way for you to begin to put this positive habit into action today. So take that one to heart. The next habit is looking at meditation. And before I move on to meditation, I'll just share that social support is so interesting. You know, I mentioned it as one of the 3 greatest predictors of success. But what's interesting about social support is that we typically think of how supported I feel. You know, am I supported enough to be happy? But what the research says is that it doesn't matter how much support you feel, it's how much support you provide to others that actually is predictive of your long-term happiness. So if you're one of those individuals who's always waiting for someone else to take action, maybe you're waiting for someone else in your department to plan the next company picnic or happy hour. Turns out that if you step up and you take the leadership to begin to provide that social support to others, you're the one who reaps the benefits in the long run, which is such a powerful information nugget that I hope you'll take away from here. Now, the 4th habit in the J game, we've talked about journaling, gratitude, acts of kindness. Meditation is the 4th habit. And meditation means many different things to different people. But for the purpose of this particular talk, what I mean by meditation is just taking 2 minutes to watch your breath go in and out. And what we're doing here is just taking a moment to go from this culturally ADHD world that we live in of multitasking to single tasking for just 2 minutes a day. And then that way we can begin to go back to our normal day of multitasking, which we all know we're going to do, but we're going to do it with a single-minded focus. So what I like to do for this particular habit is I anchor this habit with the moment that I open my laptop in the morning. And before I ever put my fingers onto the keyboard, I take that 2 minutes to watch my breath go in and out. I find that this moment for me is that moment where the tyranny of the urgent hits for the day. It's all the emails and messages and phone calls that I need to return. And before I jump in, I want to take a moment to actually settle my spirit and begin to think about what I can do to set priorities for the day, set my intention so that I do and am who I want to be. And particularly in this period of so much remote work, I find that it's incredibly important to organize my day with priorities and intention because my time is more limited. So this strategy has been one that's critical for me. Now, the 5th habit and the last one is exercise. And I will admit that exercise is the only habit I'm going to talk with you about that doesn't take 2 minutes. It takes a minimum of 15 minutes, preferably more according to your doctor. But I include exercise here in the J game list because exercise is known as a starter drug. We know that exercise gives us a cognitive boost that records an early win. So when you exercise at 9 in the morning, you feel like you can handle your inbox better at 2 p.m. So exercise begins to create these constellations of positive habits. When you exercise, you feel like doing gratitudes. And all of a sudden you want to do acts of kindness. And maybe you want to take a minute to journal. So it begins to jumpstart. It's a catalyst for all of your other positive habits. So those are the 5 habits: journaling, gratitude, acts of kindness, meditation, and exercise. If you are in person with Ladies Who Launch today, I'd love for you to write down on a sheet of paper in front of you which habit you'll be doing and share it with the person next to you. Hold it up, let them see what your habit is. If you are virtual with us here today, take a moment. You can type into the chat box which habit you want to pick, or perhaps you can just scribble it on a sheet of paper in front of you. But what we've learned from the research is that showing this goal to somebody else is incredibly important to actually achieving it. Individuals who write down their intention are 40% more likely to follow through, and individuals who write their goal large and publicly are actually 10 times more likely to follow through. So by publicly committing just now, thank you for that. I hope that provides that little extra boost for you to start a new habit. 21 days, something you're not currently doing, something that you want to try. I know some of you are probably overachievers who want to do all 5 goals at once. Let me encourage you that you start with one goal, do it for 21 days, accomplish it, then add on another one. These can become stackable habits, like James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, talks about stackable habits where you can begin to add on to something that you're already doing. Stackable habits is also a great idea for timing habits throughout the day. So for instance, I time my gratitudes with the moment in the morning when I'm getting my cup of coffee. I'll start making my cup of coffee, and while it's brewing, I'll say my 3 habits, and I'm not allowed to have that first sip of coffee until I finish saying my habits, my gratitudes. So now I've added something onto a habit I already have. I'm significantly more likely to continue with it. So these 5 habits, they're transformative for individuals, they're also great for your organizations. So what I want you to think about is maybe a way that you could practice one of these micro habits with your team. Introduce this idea of the J game, share them. Maybe everyone does a different habit. Maybe everyone tries the same one together. Maybe you make it an office challenge, but no matter where you're at, these are habits that can be done virtually, in person, and a blend of both. But they're things that we need to maintain our overall levels of positivity, to practice buffering ourselves from the negativity that we can constantly be bombarded with in the news, with information that continues to change in our lives. So take advantage of this opportunity and build this into your life. Now, tool number 2 for you is your voice. Tool number 2 for creating fearless positivity is already right inside of you. And we find our voice only by stepping into it, by putting it into action, or as Brené Brown says, by stepping into the arena and beginning to use it. So the question I want to pose to you now is, what are the challenges you face to being heard in your community? Now, we just heard Coach Mock share an important message about some of the challenges that she faces as an African-American woman in our society today. But each and every one of us has a different challenge, and maybe a few challenges. So I want you to take a moment. You don't have to share these with your neighbor, but I want you just to jot them down and think about them for a second. What are the challenges that you face to being heard? And while you're thinking about that, it's kind of a deep question, right? It's hard to think about for a second. I want to share with you one of the challenges that I've personally faced. For a long time, I have been so frustrated. I'm a writer about happiness and technology. And I got really frustrated with the media for using sensationalist language that talked about digital wellness and said, screen time is the equivalent of digital heroin. And, screen time is causing us to dissolve the fabric of connection in our society. And there was so much negativity, and it's usually aimed at big tech. Those big tech firms are doing this to us. And I felt so disempowered. But after 2 years of being a contributor to Forbes, all of a sudden I had this aha moment where I realized, oh my gosh, I am the media. What have I been waiting for? I've been talking about the media like there's some force out in the world, but I myself have a voice and I have the option to use it. And so I started to begin to interview women who were doing a wonderful job of leading the way in technology. And I began to share positive stories, not stories of how women were being beat down, but really stories of how women had overcome. And using transformative journalism, I began to find my own voice in a powerful new way. And I realized that that was something that I wielded that I didn't even know that I had the option for. So I want you to think about maybe what it is, what power you have, what voices, what communities do you have to speak into where you do have a voice. It could be just within your family. It could be with your grandparents. It could be with your children. It could be within your organization. But each and every one of us has an opportunity to use our voice for good. Another positive way that you can begin to use your voice is something that I call the power lead. It helps to amplify your voice by using positive priming as a strategy to stack the deck in your favor. Now, as women entrepreneurs, I know that this is particularly important, not only to use with your colleagues, but especially with customers. We often talk about the importance of first impressions, right? And we think about body language, and we try to come up with ways to shape a conversation to get out of it what we hope. But we often overlook the initial pleasantries that shape the rest of the conversation that comes after. The power lead is that moment at the very beginning of the conversation where you begin to shape what's going to come after it. And so to be a little bit more specific, you can think about some of the tone that you're setting. For instance, when I say, "Hi, how are you?" you have a couple of responses, but usually the response I get back are fine, okay, great, awful. And the conversation can go any which way. I might have just lost it at that particular moment. The very first thing that came out of my mouth, I lost the power by passing it over to the other person, because the moment the other person was like, "Oh my gosh, today was just the worst day. You wouldn't believe what happened." And then that person starts to go, right? So I've now let go of that moment by letting them have that. So instead, what I want to do is maybe say, you know what? For instance, I'll just speak to you, Loretta. Loretta, what I've been wanting to say is, I'm so glad to see you. And I just wanted to say what a wonderful job you did planning this meeting. I just really want to say how much I appreciate you. From that moment at the beginning of the conversation, it not only establishes my thought leadership, it sets the conversation on a good note, but it also makes a negative retort that much less likely. So now I've taken the power into that situation. So I want you to think about, in some of those other situations, perhaps in meetings where you start a meeting, how do you start it? Or how do you start an email? How do you start a conversation with your children? Is there a certain way that you can frame things that begins to set the other person on a positive note so that you can then make positive progress through the conversation? That's the power lead. And one of the things that we learn in positive psychology from a researcher named Lasada, she created something called the Lasada line, which says that for every negative comment that's given, you need 7 positive comments for the individual to hear you in a different way. So a 7-to-1 ratio of positive to negative to outweigh anything. So this is important if you're having to provide constructive criticism to an individual or an employee where you are trying to figure out how to convey information. If you're always harping on the negative, thinking that you're helping them get better, turns out they tuned you out a long time back. If you really want to help them move forward, you've got to play the game to begin to use the power lead and the ratio of the Lasada line to help you develop your social influence and your effectiveness at communication. So that's the power lead. Now, tool number 3, we've talked about your voice. We've talked about your mindset. Tool number 3 is your vision. And my question to you is, what is your vision? What is your vision for the world, for your role, for who you are as an individual? And how is that vision going to happen if not through you? How would you make it happen? I worked with an organization with my brother out in Silicon Valley way at the beginning of Good Think, our organization. And this organization had brought us in because there was really negative, low morale at the organization. They had this conference room and basement where supposedly all the creative brainstorming was supposed to be happening. But the employees affectionately and sort of jokingly called it the dungeon because this room was so dim and dark. There was very little window light. It just was kind of a depressing place. And yet this was supposed to be where all the creativity and magic were going to happen. And so one day, one of the employees decided to have his children make this beautiful mural of suns and clouds and flowers to brighten up the room. And he went up and he hung it in the office and everybody was loving it and saying, "Hey, thanks for that. That's so fun. I love it. It just brightens up the room." Everybody except for that one individual who went straight to the head of HR and he said, "You know what? I can't focus. What kind of place is this? Is like a freaking kindergarten or what? You got to take this down. I just can't deal with it." And so that poor HR director dutifully went down, took down the artwork. Do you know that the next day there was such an uproar from all the other employees who had actually appreciated the tiny gesture that the CEO himself had to go back in and hang up that artwork in the dungeon? Why do we sometimes let that one negative individual, that one squeaky wheel, begin to overshadow everything else that we're trying to do in an organization? So beginning to think about these social scripts, these unwritten rules for communication and what should or shouldn't be done in an organization can help us wield more power by beginning to think through how we can use our vision and execute on it, no matter what environment we are in. Who writes the social script? You do. You get to shape what happens in your environment. And those individuals who help make it a more positive environment have been statistically found to be seen as better leaders, more authentic leaders, more charismatic leaders as well. We know that fearless leaders seize the opportunity to create positive change through their mind, through their voice, through their vision. So the question I want to ask you today is, what will you do with your power? I've given you lots of great ideas for actionable steps, from picking one of the J games to do for the next 21 days, to practice this, perhaps micro habits and teams together, to think through power leads and how you can begin to use your voice to be an effective source of influence within your organization or your community. But what are you going to do with your power? Stepping away today, being really authentic, facing against our fears in this opportunity that we have in the pandemic in 2020. How can we begin to use fearless positivity to overcome using our voice and our mind and our vision for the world? I want to let you have information for how to stay in touch with me. I'd love to hear some of your ideas. If you have stories you want to share, or you have things that have worked particularly well for you, this is my website, my social feeds. But I also know we're going to have Q&A. So if you have questions, I believe you get to type them into the chat, and Loretta's going to help me to facilitate this conversation a little bit more. I would love to hear what's on your mind. I always like to learn a lot from audiences who are some of the best experts on what's going on in the world and have some great ideas. So please share. And Loretta, I'll turn it back over to you now.
Thank you so much, Amy. We are so excited to have you here today, and thank you for all of the power, the fearless positivity, and the tools that you shared with us today. We do have some questions that have already started coming in today. I had previously shared that I was able to see Amy's brother. She referred to him several times today, and I was able to see her brother a couple years ago, and he told us a story. And so when we first started setting up this event this year, I started connecting the dots and was like, oh my gosh, Amy is the unicorn. So your first question is, start with the unicorn story.
Oh boy. So my brother, Sean, he is a fantastic storyteller. And he often tells the story that he shared once in this TED Talk back when TED was a new platform, and wound up having the story go viral. And the story was that he and I had been playing on the top bunk of our bed. He was the G.I. Joes. I was My Little Ponies. My parents were taking a nap, and we were supposed to play quietly, or so was our instruction. And over the course of this epic battle between My Little Ponies and G.I. Joes, my Little Ponies were kicking butt. And my brother got a little frustrated by that. And so not only did he try to sweep off the My Little Ponies off the bed, but he accidentally swept me off the bed as well. I went careening to the floor, landed on all fours, and I was about to scream bloody murder to call my parents, and my brother knew he was in hot water. And so he thought quickly on his feet, and he said, Amy, wait, did you see how you landed? No human lands on all fours like that. Now, mind you, I'm like 5 years old at this point, so don't judge me too much here. But at that point in my life, I wanted nothing more than to be a unicorn. It was my lifelong dream. And so Sean said, Amy, did you see how you landed? You must be a unicorn. And I thought, oh, I am? And all of a sudden I forgot about how mad I was about the fact that he had just knocked me off the bed. And I suddenly started to contemplate this amazing new possibility that I could possibly achieve my dream of being a unicorn. But Sean goes on to tell the story about how that was a moment where he, as Big Brother, was teaching me the importance of learning to think about life from a different perspective, and to shift our thinking to be positive, even in the moments where we're frustrated or angry. You'll have to watch the TED Talk for yourself. He does a great job of telling the story. But thanks to him, I'm now known as Amy the Unicorn to more people in the world than actually know who I am.
Well, I think that maybe your parents need to write a book too, because both Amy and her brother graduated from Harvard, and they're happiness experts now. And so there's something behind that parenting. Maybe, I don't know, have your parents ever thought of writing a book?
I don't think they have, but I will tell you, Loretta, and I think it's an important point that both of my parents actually, they're very positive people, but they both came out of incredibly negative situations. My mother had an alcoholic father. There was abuse on both sides of the family. There was all kinds of drama. And both of my parents made a distinct choice in their lives to change the way that they wanted to live their life. And they can remember the moment where each of them made that choice, and they chose to raise us as very positive individuals. And I'm so, so grateful, because the lessons I've learned from them about how happiness can be a choice is phenomenal. It's changed my life. So I think that, we always joke about, both of us are happiness experts, but the truth is that I give my parents a lot of props for helping me get where I am today.
I think that's a great story about adversity and overcoming obstacles and resilience, which is a lot of what we've talked about today. We have another question about, do you have a favorite journal that you use?
Well, I do have a favorite journal. So I like to write on just about any scrap of paper that I have in front of me, which is not very organized, but I do that for moments where I'm trying to do the journaling, like I talked about, for 2 minutes a day, where you're just writing down a meaningful moment. But I actually use an app for my long-term journaling. And that app is called Day One. And it is a photo-based app that each day I'll pick one photo that'll trigger a memory from the day. And then I'll write 1 or 2 things about what was happening in that photo. And particularly in quarantine, I've been using it with my children to create a sort of a time capsule of what happened in this blur of the last 3 months, and to remember all of the beautiful things that happened unexpectedly that turned out better than expected. And I think that's been really, really powerful. So Day One app is another favorite besides just journaling on anything I can find.
Amy talks about in her book, and she talked about it again today, about the 21 days to create a new habit. But one of the other questions here is, how long does it take to unlearn a negative response to a pattern?
That's such a great question. And while there's no specific number, because I think that everybody's experience is a little bit different, what I have found is that it can be truly a little bit more difficult for individuals who have particularly negative childhoods or negative experiences to overcome. So I would say that 21 days, maybe on the low end, you might take a little bit longer, upwards of 90 days or 120 days to relearn some of those habits, but that it absolutely is possible that change can happen no matter where we're coming from, and not to give up when it's difficult or when you feel yourself backsliding. It's less important about how often you fall off the horse and more important about how many times you get back on the horse. So keep that in mind as well.
Okay, we have another one that was also a topic for today, centered around COVID-19, and how can we exemplify fearless positivity as leaders through the rest of this crisis?
I think that social support is so important at this time. And what I've discovered, and I hope, well, perhaps it resonates with you, is that the pandemic has really affected everybody in different ways and at different times. And I've been so grateful that when I have a down moment, that I can reliably find somebody who can pull me up when I'm having a dark moment. And for instance, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was terrified about, travel. I was actually out of the country when stage 4 restrictions were implemented on the country. And so I was worried about travel. I was worried about health. I was worried about finances. Never in there did I think to worry about my husband getting in a car accident. And that's exactly what happened. He was on the highway. He hit a wet spot on the road during a rainstorm, and his car did a 360 and hit the median. And I was on the phone with him on Bluetooth at the time. It was just horrifying. And I remember, and I'm so grateful, he's completely fine. He actually drove off and was okay. So I'm so grateful. But that week after that, I was so shaken from that moment. And it was all of the individuals around me that were the ones who really helped me through that moment. So I think as leaders, empathy, compassion, and also authenticity are some of the greatest strengths that a leader can show right now. And recognizing that you may not have a good day. Your leadership might be a little bit off 1 or 2 days. So give yourself a little grace that's okay. But to not try to disinvest from people. The trend that we see as positive psychologists is that when people are most in need of social support, they tend to disinvest in people around them. Maybe you stop texting, maybe you stop calling people or responding. And those are the very moments when we need to invest even more, or other people invest in you. So as a leader, it's less about, how do we pivot to take advantage of the situation, and more about how do we become true leaders who are thinking not just about ourselves or our situation, but really more globally as well.
I think that's very important these days, especially the part about giving grace. I think that there is a lot of need these days for grace in all aspects of our day, and learning. I've said a lot through this whole thing as a leader myself that there's not a lot of judgment that comes from me about a lot of things, because I don't want to be in the positions that some of these people in who are having to make hard decisions. And I think the more grace and the more compassion that we have for people these days, as people are pivoting, as they're making different decisions, the better off that we'll be. One of the other questions that came through are there any of your J game activities that are more helpful than others?
So I like to give all 5 because I think different ones work for different people at different times. I know some individuals who've been journaling for 20 years. And so that one's, they're already pretty good at that one. I don't think you need to keep working at it. It's already a habit. But for me personally, I think the one that has been most important for me right now is meditation. I find that I get frenzied by a lot of the information and inputs in my life right now. And the news is something that we know we have to tune into, but is also, it's spiking all that cortisol that we talked about that sends you into fight or flight. So meditation for me is the ability to slow down and process information and to really be okay and recognize that I have all the tools within me that I've been developing and practicing for years now that I can draw on to make a difference.
That's the one I wrote in my book.
All right.
I like it. We have one final question for you. And I know that this can sometimes be hard, especially if we're close to some of these people like you talked about maybe earlier, if they're some of our coworkers, our friends, our family. But what can we do to tune out negative influences that we can't escape in our daily lives? So if we we can't escape them.
That's so important. It's so important. I think of that image of the ostrich who puts the head in the sand, right? Like sometimes that's what we want to do to block out all the negativity. But in truth, I really want to be aware. And this time I want to be woke. I want to be thoughtful. I want to be intentional. And I want to do so with a focus on how I can use that information. And so by saying that, it means that, yes, every day I still check the news. I know that the research shows, actually from my sister-in-law, she's also a positive psychology researcher. She wrote this book called Broadcasting Happiness, and she was a former network news anchor. And what they learned is that in network news, the idea behind the news is if it bleeds, it leads. And so there's this sensationalism that gets people to read the news, and it triggers, of course, the cortisol response again. But it actually matters what time of day that you check the news. She and my brother did this research study that found that if you read the news within the first 5 minutes of waking up, that it can impact your mood, your mindset, and your productivity up to 6 hours later. And they published a study in Harvard Business Review if anyone wants to check it out. But it's just a phenomenal data point for me because it says, what time of day I'm checking the news and for how long and how many times is actually really important. So my husband and I have been really intentional lately about deciding to check the news. When we check, we're going to read for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, turn it off. And I only check twice a day, beginning of the day and end of the day at some point, usually after coffee. It goes better that way. And so I think that's one way I'm controlling negativity. I'm also actively not trying to go onto dialogues where I know people are going head to head and kind of back and forth that I can't do anything about and is not going in a good place. So I'm pulling back out of social media circles that I feel like are not advancing where I want to go as a person. So I have to be really mindful about that as well.
Well, I want to thank you again. Volt wants to thank you for being our keynote today and working with us on helping to create fearless positivity in our community. So again, we thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you, Loretta. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Loretta and Amy, for that wonderful dialogue and the keynote. I wrote down meditation as mine, and I think my biggest takeaway is that she said 2 minutes of meditation. And I feel like usually they're telling you 20 minutes of meditation, and like the whole 20 minutes I'm spending thinking, oh my gosh, I have to sit here for 20 minutes. So I like the 2 minutes. I think I can put that into practice pretty easily. I want to say also, before I forget, I keep writing this down. I want to make sure I say thank you to our team, the team here at 417, who just really quickly, I know we've used the word pivoted so many times, but really in a very short amount of time took this to a fully virtual event, which was not easy. And I just want to say thank you so much to Dale and Lauren and Jesse and Janelle and Julie and Meg. I think those are all the names. I'm so sorry if okay, I got a thumbs up from Dale. I didn't forget anybody, but thank you guys so much. And to Glendalough for hosting us still today, and to Southwest AV for helping us take it all virtual. So I hope that you feel as inspired as I do. I know I have a really full heart after today, seeing so many authentic, warm, open, and honest people on the stage today, and all of them from here right in 417 land, or beamed in from Dallas, with just really wonderful messages for us at a time when we really, really could use it. And thank you for our sponsors for rolling with us and continuing to let us bring this great content to the women of 417 land today. So one more time, I want to thank Volt Credit Union and Loretta. Thank you so much, especially for bringing Amy in. BKD CPAs and Advisors for making it possible for us to hear from Coach Mox. For Mercy, letting us hear from wonderful women in our community who have had to lead through a lot of different challenging situations through their crisis. Spencer Fain for bringing in Nancy Allen. She was a riot. That was a great way to start the day. And thank you again to Reliable Lexus. I also wanted to say thank you to Alina Leonard for being our MC once again. Thank you, Alina. We always love having you guide us through our day. And again, for our event partners, Groom's Office Environments, Ozarks Coca-Cola, and Rosie, thank you so much. So if you missed some of the programming today, it will all be saved to view on demand at biz417.com and on our YouTube channel. And you can also share it out with others. We will be sending our event survey. Again, we're looking for your ideas on content that really helps us guide what speakers we look for next year. And we really, really hope that we can all be here together next year. I will definitely be looking forward to that day. So thank you so much. I hope you feel inspired and ready to launch, and that you have a great rest of your afternoon. Thank you.